Chapter 2593. She placed the chessboard on the table and sat down across from him. Cupping her hands, she said, "Ancestor, please." Shen Juli sat in place, not intending to make a move. "You don't want to continue watching their story? They won't be able to finish it in a short time." Ning Xuemo replied indifferently, but she suddenly stopped because she heard a voice from the tent. "Ji Yu, I won't force you." Jun Liuya seemed to be suppressing something. "I'm sorry." Ji Yu's voice trembled. I know we're already married, but I don't have any memories of this. I'm a little scared." "It's fine, we'll have plenty of time in the future." Jun Liuya's voice had already returned to normal. "Qianshang, you love me so much. I'm very happy." Ji Yu's voice was sweet, but she suddenly changed the topic. "Do you remember what day it is today?" Jun Liuya paused. "Today is the Purple Moon Festival?" "Yes, Qianshang, today is the Purple Moon Festival. Let's go out and admire the moon together, okay? You said you wanted to take me to Star Moon Country's mountain to admire the moon. You even said the moon here is unique and beautiful. Can you take me there?" Jun Liuya readily agreed. Of course. Wait a moment, I'll go arrange it first." "Good." Once the tent door opened, Jun Liuya walked out. He called two of his trusted aides and gave them a few instructions before returning to the tent. A moment later, he and Ji Yu walked out hand in hand. The weather outside was quite cold, but the two were in high spirits. The two had changed their clothes. Jun Liuya was wearing a loose blue robe that fluttered in the wind behind him, looking elegant and romantic. Ji Yu was wearing a pink dress with a white fox cloak on the outside. The snow-white fur contrasted with her captivating red face, making her even more stunning. Ning Xuema's gaze fell on Jun Liuya, and her eyes suddenly narrowed. The current Jun Liuya's temperament gave her a faint feeling of familiarity, but she couldn't recall who it was. Jun Liuya's army was stationed in the valley. Behind the camp was a towering mountain that looked like a silent giant beast in the night. "Ji Yu, where do you want to go?" Jun Liuya held her waist. Ji Yu looked around, unable to make up her mind. "You're familiar with the terrain here, so let's find the tallest mountain." It was more interesting to admire the moon from the peak. Jun Liuya also looked at the peak in the distance. The highest peak is outside the camp. Ji Yu looked at him and said, "Will it be dangerous?" "If it's dangerous, then don't go." Jun Liuya's gaze focused on her face and he smiled. "It's okay. It's worth it no matter how big the risk is for you." His smile was the same as before, with an indescribable doting. Ji Yu looked away and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Qianshang, you're so good to me." Pain flashed across Jun Liuya's eyes, but he quickly smiled and led her away. "Let's go." The two of them walked slowly in front while Jun Liuya's 4 personal guards followed them from a distance. After walking for a while, Ji Yu occasionally turned back and saw the 4 guards. She then turned back to look at Jun Liuya. "We're admiring the moon. Should we let them follow?" Jun Liuya paused in his steps and waved at the 4 guards behind him, indicating for them to wait where they were. The guard captain was still worried. "Your Majesty, it's wartime now. I'm afraid it's not safe outside the camp. Why don't we bring a team of guards with us?" Jun Liuya looked at Ji Yu. Chapter 2594. Jun Liuya looked at Ji Yu. Ji Yu pursed her lips. "I don't like being watched when admiring the moon. However, Your Majesty's safety is also very important. If Your Majesty wants them to follow, then let them follow." Jun Liuya looked at her for a moment and smiled. He said softly, "I don't like being watched either. Ji Yu, let's go. You don't have to follow." Holding her hand, they gradually walked away. The guards followed for 2 steps, but they didn't dare to disobey His Majesty's order. They could only stop. Because there was a battle just now, they could still see fallen corpses along the way. Each of them looked hideous and incomplete. There were soldiers who specialized in dealing with the aftermath of the battle, collecting them. Seeing His Majesty coming with a woman, these soldiers all bowed and saluted. Jun Liuya just waved his hand and let them do their thing. He then left with Ji Yu. Turning his head, he saw that Ji Yu's face was slightly pale. He pulled her into his arms. "Scared?" Ji Yu said, "They're bloody." Before she could finish, Jun Liuya bent over and picked her up. Her face was buried in his chest. His heartbeat was steady, and his voice was also steady. These don't suit you. Don't look. His figure rose, and like a fluttering wind, he carried her and flew into the depths of the mountain. He was afraid of scaring Jiyu again, so he went far away from the battlefield. However, this would require him to walk more than 10 miles. Why must we fight? Jiyu leaned in his arms, her voice a little muffled. It's good to live a peaceful life. The people can live and work in peace. Junlioya's footsteps paused slightly, but he didn't say anything. Jiyu raised her head in his arms. I heard that you attacked Xinhua country this time to cure my illness. Is that true? Junlioya looked down at her. Who told you that? Because he was afraid that the king of Xinhua country would destroy the pearl if he knew. Junlioya never told anyone his purpose. Only his true confidants knew where Jiyu got this information from. Jiyu blinked. It's the 8th prince. Did I say something wrong? Junlioya breathed a sigh of relief. He did tell Jun Lufeng. Jun Lufeng always thought that Jiyu was crazy and didn't like to talk, so it was possible that he talked in front of her. He said softly, That's right. Star Moon Country has a pearl that can cure your illness. But I'm fine now, so I don't need that bead anymore. So let's not fight anymore, right? Jiyu looked at him seriously. Junlioya did not say anything. The war had been going on for so long. As long as they could win this battle, they would be able to march straight into the capital of Star Moon Nation, completely destroy Star Moon Nation, and unify this continent. This had always been his dream, and it was also the ultimate dream of his generals, who had fought bloody battles for many years. Now the entire army had suffered so many casualties and paid so much blood and lives for this battle. Seeing that victory was in sight, how could they retreat just like that? Jiyu looked at him for a moment and suddenly smiled. Okay, I was joking. Your ambition has always been great, and you have the ability to dominate the world. In the future, when you conquer the world, I hope that you can become an emperor for all eternity, and leave your name in history for hundreds of generations. Gui, Junlioya muttered to himself. Just as he was about to say something, Jiyu reached out a finger and touched his lips. Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. The moon is beautiful tonight, so let's focus on looking at the moon. It was such a beautiful night, so it was better not to talk about these disappointing things. He still had many things to explain to her in the future. They still had plenty of time in the future. A little earlier today, eager, sincere, begging for a monthly vote, a recommendation vote. My dear little masters, please give the monthly vote to Mumu. Chapter 2595. Alright. Junlioya revealed a smile, and lowered his head to gently kiss her lips. We'll talk about it later. Seeing that his lover was fine, Junlioya didn't care about anything else, and just wanted to make her happy. The snowy peaks were covered in snow with ice towers and ice mushrooms everywhere. The moon was bright, and the mountain was high. Standing on this ice peak, the moon seemed much bigger and brighter. The moonlight here was truly beautiful. The faint purple moonlight fell on the ice peak, and reflected a strange light, just like a crystal palace. Jiyu stood on an ice tower, and looked up at the purple moon in the sky, as if she was entranced. Junlioya was looking at her. The moon here is really beautiful. It's like a painting. Jiyu turned around on the ice peak. Her skirt fluttered in the wind, like a flower blooming in the moonlight. Junlioya simply sat down. You're even more beautiful than the moon. He sat in a lazy and carefree manner. His blue robe fluttered in the wind, making him look like an immortal. At this time, he was no longer the decisive Iron-Blood Azura war general, but rather the king of assassins Yi Qianshang, who had doted on her, loved her, and liked to tease her, but also held her in his hands. Jiyu tilted her head to look at him. Your mouth is as sweet as before. Junlioya stretched out his legs and waved his hand at her. It's cold up there. I'll hold you and watch from below. Jiyu shook her head. You'll see the truth when you stand high, isn't that right? Her words seemed to imply something. Junlioya raised his head, and looked at her for a moment. Suddenly, he got up and flew straight to her side. He hugged her waist and said, Then I'll watch it with you. The two figures on the ice tower were leaning against each other. He was tall and handsome while she was petite. The moonlight fell on them like water, creating a beautiful scene. Ning Xuema was invisible in the air as she watched the pair below. She couldn't help letting out a sigh. Great God, don't you feel like something is wrong? Julie declined to comment. Something's wrong. Let's watch the play. The two people below stood on the ice tower and looked at the moon for a while. Liuye said, Jiyu, in the future, I will take you to see all the moons on this continent. They all have their own characteristics. Jiyu smiled and looked at him from the side. Under the moonlight, her eyes were like water. I think that our Jiyu country's purple moon city's Huayu Tower's moon is the most beautiful. Don't you think so? Liuye stiffened slightly. That place used to be the place where the crystal was enshrined. It was also the place where he used her to destroy Ziyu City's enchantment. That night, he accompanied her to watch the moon for half the night. It gave her the greatest happiness, but it also destroyed her home. After the city was breached, that place was also burned down by the crown prince's troops, leaving behind only broken walls and ruins. He thought that Jiyu would be traumatized by that place and would never want to go there again, so he didn't recultivate. Since she liked it, he would send someone to rebuild it and make it exactly the same. Jiyu, I'll take you there to see it in the future. Liuye promised her and took the opportunity to hold her hand. Even though she was wearing so much, her little hand was still cold, as if it would never be warmed up. Liuye calmly channeled energy into his palm, making his palm like a small heater, trying to warm her hand up. Jiyu didn't say anything and didn't avoid him. She was staring at the moon in a daze. Her frequency of being in a daze was especially high today. Liuye didn't say anything either. He simply hugged her and sat down on the ice peak. He rested his head on her shoulder and sighed softly. Jiyu, I never thought that we would have a day like this. Chapter 2596. He thought that she would be muddle-headed for the rest of her life, never talking to him again, never looking at him again. He never thought that there would be a time when they could lean on each other like this. God knows how long he had been longing for this moment. Jiyu came back to her senses and looked at him. Her eyes were as clear as water under the moonlight. Qianshang. Jiyu, call me Luyi. His breath blew into her ears. He actually hoped that she would call him by his real name. After all, Yi Qianshang was only his alias. Jiyu paused and tilted her head to look at him for a bit. Jun Luyi. Your real name is more like you. What do you mean? Jun Luye's breath was on her neck. My heart flows like the night. You were once a Shura general, and Shuras belong to the night. Jiyu actually began to drop her book bag. Jun Luyi was silent for a bit behind her before letting out a soft sigh. My thoughts are all on you right now. At this moment, he was still the charming Yi Qianshang. His hand was supporting his head as he looked at her with a teasing gaze, but also a burning gaze. Jiyu's eyelashes trembled and half covered her eyes, making it hard for people to see her expression. She no longer looked at him, and her face was a bit red. Are you shy? Jun Luyi reached out to hold her in his embrace. Jiyu, I hope that we can have this day every year. He didn't ask for anything else. He just wanted her to stay by his side. Her black hair was a bit cold. He rubbed his chin against her head and excitedly said, Jiyu, how about I help you style your hair? Jiyu paused for a bit before nodding. Jun Luyi straightened her body and used his fingers as a comb, beginning to comb her long hair. Her black hair was like silk, smooth and soft as it flowed through his fingers. After a while, her long hair was combed into a beautiful bun, and a jade hairpin sparkled in her hair. You're quite skilled. Do you often help girls style their hair before? Jiyu rubbed her hair, as she spoke in a half-joking manner. Idiot, I often helped you style your hair before. Jun Luye's voice was filled with pampering and helplessness. Jiyu's fingers stiffened, and then she touched the hairpin again. She was stunned for a moment, but she had already felt the shape and texture of the hairpin. It was the hairpin Yi Qianshang had given her. She had treated it like a treasure, and would take it out to look at it several times a day. She was as happy as a fool. Now that the hairpin was back in her hair, she felt her scalp hurt from the cold. She seemed to be in a daze. Jun Liuye looked at her. Jiyu? Jiyu suddenly stood up, tilted her head and smiled at him, smiling innocently and charmingly. How about I dance for you? Jun Liuye clapped his hands. Good. I've long heard that your singing and dancing are superb. Today is a good opportunity to appreciate it. I'll accompany you. He took out a purple bamboo flute. The sound of the flute rang out faintly, like the rising of the wind and the blooming of flowers, drifting leisurely through the mountain peak. Ning Xuema looked down and saw his light blue robe fluttering in the wind like flowing water. The beautiful jade on his waist swayed slightly. He looked free and easy. His bearing made Ning Xuema feel like it was very familiar, like she had seen it before. She knew quite a few people, including all kinds of handsome men, but there were very few people with Jun Luye's bearing. Lazy and free, with a faint trace of cynicism. Who did he resemble? Jun Luye's appearance and bearing were both very good. Ning Xuema thought that if she had seen him before, she would not have forgotten him. Chapter 2597. But looking at him now, he looked familiar. But no matter how she looked at it, she couldn't match him with the handsome guys in her mind. Could it be that he was a passerby she met 50,000 years ago? Ning Xuema didn't have many memories from 50,000 years ago. She only had memories of when she transmigrated. But her original memories from 50,000 years ago were only fragmented. Among these fragmented memories, there was no such person as Jun Luye. A snow-white sleeve stretched out to block Ning Xuema's line of sight. She followed the sleeve and saw Shenjuli's eyes as deep as a lake. He was half sitting there with one arm supporting his head. His sleeve just happened to block Ning Xuema's line of sight, while his other hand was casually tapping the beat. Seeing Ning Xuema looking at him, he lazily said, "It's better to listen to the flute. There's no need to stare at it. Don't you think so?" Ning Xuema's eyes curved like crescent moons. The great god spoke in such a dignified manner. But he was actually jealous, right? She seized the opportunity to hug his sleeve and said in a deadpan manner, "And the great god is right. In the future, when the great god plays the zither, I'll just listen. There's no need to run over to look." Shenjuli. Below, Jiyu had already begun to dance to the flute. The round moon in the sky was like a jade plate, and the snowy peaks on the ground were like crystals. In the midst of the white snow, Jiyu's red dress fluttered. The wind blew and her sleeves fluttered, making it seem as if she was flying. Twirling, bending, turning. Her slender body turned into all kinds of beautiful arcs, and her bright and beautiful eyes reflected the moonlight like shattered crystals on the lake. Jiyu's dancing was very good, far better than what Jun Luye had expected. He felt that he had never seen such a beautiful dance in his life. His girl was like a ball of fire, a flower slowly blooming in this world of ice and snow, making him unable to move his eyes away. She fluttered in front of him and circled him 3 times. He looked at her with a smile, the sound of the flute clear and quiet, his eyes filled with affection. Ding! The jade hairpin on her head suddenly slipped off and fell to the icy ground, breaking into several pieces. The sound of the flute paused for a moment. She suddenly staggered and fell into his arms. He raised his arms, wanting to hug her, but his body suddenly stiffened. The sharp tip of a snow-white sword pierced through his back. Hot blood instantly flowed out, soaking his blue robe and staining her fingers that were holding the sword. Jiyu also seemed to be in a daze as she stared at the blood-stained sword hilt that had pierced into her opponent's body. Her fingertips trembled slightly, but she didn't retreat immediately. A large hand came over and grabbed her hand that was holding the sword. That hand held her tightly. She suddenly raised her head and looked into his long and narrow eyes. He was still in the same position as before. His left hand was holding the bamboo flute, and his right hand was holding her hand. He even hugged her with no intention of letting go. Of course, he had no intention of slapping her away. Even his eyes were calm, without much emotion. "Jiyu, you didn't lose your memory." Jiyu's eyes slightly shrank. She suddenly raised her head and laughed. "Of course. Jun Luye, you also have a day like this." She laughed happily, as if she wanted to laugh out all the things that had been stuck in her heart these past few days. She succeeded. She had finally succeeded. She had finally killed the Sajura. She had finally killed the enemy who had caused her family to be destroyed. She had finally made him pay the price he deserved. She should be happy. She should be happy. So she laughed louder and louder. She laughed until her voice changed pitch. Chapter 2598. Jun Liuya held her tightly, and she didn't want to struggle. She wasn't afraid of him taking revenge on her and strangling her to death. Her greatest wish had been fulfilled, and she no longer cared about life and death. What joy was there in life, and what fear was there in death? She had struggled at death's door until now, all for this moment. More and more blood flowed out, and her hands became more and more sticky. The smell of blood filled her nose, and she laughed until tears came out. Jun Liuya, so your blood is also red. Ning Xuema, who was watching from the side, also let out a soft sigh. She finally made a move. Shen Juli glanced at her. You knew she was going to make a move? Ning Xuema said. Of course. She actually had 8 chances to make a move, but she missed them all. I was worried for her. Shen Juli was speechless. Ning Xuema sighed. The girl who was once as pure as crystal has actually learned how to act. Her acting is quite good, and there are almost no flaws. Shen Juli put a hand on her shoulder. But it didn't escape your eyes, did it? Ning Xuema said. Of course. I was the king of assassins in the past, and observing people's expressions is my forte. Although Ji Yu's disguise was good, in the eyes of a professional agent like Ning Xuema, there were still many flaws. Shen Juli glanced at the 2 people below and said lightly, Jun Liuya is also the #1 expert in the world of assassins. In other words, if Ning Xuema could see through it, he might be able to see through it as well. Ning Xuema was startled. She understood what Shen Juli was trying to say. She shook her head. The IQ of a man and a woman in love will plummet. Those who are closely involved will not be able to see the situation clearly. Ji Yu's disguise was good, and Jun Liuya might not have been able to see through it. Otherwise he wouldn't have taken that sword, right? Shen Juli pointed at the 2 people. Then did you see where Jun Liuya was stabbed? Ning Xuema frowned. I saw it clearly. It should be near the heart meridian. It's a critical place. However, Ji Yu was probably still a little nervous, so the position of her sword was a little off. Otherwise, it would have taken Jun Liuya's life. Shen Juli shook his head slightly. It's not that she missed, but that Jun Liuya's muscles moved slightly to the side when she was stabbing at him, so the attack didn't hit his vitals. Ning Xuema. She didn't expect the Almighty to be even more observant than her. This perverted insight. However, with Jun Liuya's ability to adjust his muscles slightly, shouldn't he be able to completely dodge the attack? Then why? Ning Xuema thought of something and blurted out. He took Ji Yu's sword on purpose. Shen Juli rubbed her hair in relief. Smart girl. Ning Xuema looked down at Jun Liuya with a complicated gaze. This person's thoughts were extremely meticulous. Everything he did was planned out before he acted. It could be said that he was watertight. Why did he take that sword on purpose? What was his plan? On the ice peak, Jun Liuya finally couldn't hold on any longer. His body slowly fell to the snow below his feet. Fresh blood gushed out from his body, quickly forming a small pool of blood. The white snow and the red blood were especially glaring. Ji Yu finally jumped away from his body. She took a few steps back and tripped over something, falling to the ground with a plop. She seemed to have lost all her strength. Sitting there, she looked at Jun Liuya lying not far away, her gaze trembling slightly. Perhaps it was because he had lost too much blood, but Jun Liuya's face was as white as snow. His dark eyes looked at Ji Yu, as if whirlpools were swirling in them. His pale lips opened and closed a few times before he hoarsely said, Ji Yu, like this, will you vent your anger? Chapter 2599. Ji Yu's face had been flushed with excitement, but now it was slowly losing its color. She clenched her fists, her face even paler than his. Her palms were stained with blood, and she subconsciously wiped them on the snow. She hatefully said, Jun Liuya, you owe me this. Although her words were fierce, her voice was trembling. Jun Liuya looked at her, his beautiful eyes half narrowed. His gaze was so deep that it made one's heart palpitate. You're right this. I owe you. His voice became softer and softer, and finally, his eyes slowly closed. He's dead. Ji Yu's entire body stiffened, as if her soul had been sucked out of her body. She sat there staring blankly, not moving at all. Haha, not bad. A voice suddenly came from a mountain not far away. Following that, More than 10 figures appeared from the surrounding mountain peaks. The person in the lead was dressed in a beautiful snow-white robe, with a jade crown on his head. His face was powdered, and his lips were like a painted pill. He looked to be in his 20s, and he was handsome and delicate, like an elegant young master. However, there was a hint of a king's domineering aura beneath his brows. The others were all dressed in the uniform of a warrior. They were all dressed in white, and even their hair was snow-white, almost the same color as the surrounding snow. These people were clearly the young master's subordinates. They clustered around him, faintly protecting him in the middle. Ning Xuema, who was watching the show from the sky, was moved. This is the king of Xingyue country? Should be. Shen Juli also glanced at the young king. I heard that the king of Xingyue country has a pearl that can guarantee immortality and eternal youth. This person is probably a few hundred years old, right? Eternal youth is true, but that pearl doesn't have the effect of making people immortal. Shen Juli's tone was indifferent. Huh. Ning Xuemo raised her eyebrows. She was still a little puzzled. Great God, back then you left treasures for the 3 countries. These treasures should have the ability to protect the country, right? Why did you give Xingyue country a beauty pearl? That pearl's eternal youth is just a side effect. Then what's the main effect? It allows the wearer to teleport away in an instant no matter how badly injured they are. It can even bring along 80 generals. Ning Xuema gave a thumbs up. This function is awesome. If a king could escape with his elite ministers in an instant, then there would be no such thing as the fall of a country. Because of these elite forces, even if his capital city was breached, he could still organize his forces to counterattack. This time, Junliuye had attacked Star Moon country. It was easy to take over the capital of Star Moon country, but to completely eliminate the ruler of Star Moon country was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Ning Xuema looked at everything below and sighed. I didn't expect Jiyu to join hands with this monarch. It seems that her madness was also cured by this monarch with the bead. That should be the case. Shen Juli nodded slightly. I heard that the monarch of Star Moon country is also a person of great talent and strategy. His intelligence is not much worse than Junliuye's. It seems that he is indeed very scheming. He is not Junliuye's opponent, so he actually put an effort on Jiyu. This time, he even personally took action. Shen Juli said indifferently, he and Junliuye are enemies. If there is a chance to see Junliuye die with his own eyes, he won't let it go. That's true. Ning Xuemo nodded. The monarch of Star Moon country was defeated by Junliuye and must hate him to the bone. He couldn't wait to personally cut him into pieces. Now that there was such a chance, he would definitely want to see it with his own eyes. Who knows, he might even want to stab him a few more times. Chapter 2600. Ning Xuema's guess was very normal. The king of Xingyue country looked at the unconscious Junliuye lying on the ground. His face was filled with pride as he slowly walked towards Junliuye. Your Majesty, this person is dangerous. He's not dead yet. Your Majesty shouldn't go near him. His loyal subordinate hurriedly stopped him. Star Moon country's king waved his hand and waved his subordinate away. He didn't say anything, but he sneered in his heart. This person's vital point was hit. Even if he didn't die, he would die soon. What could he do? He wanted to go up and stab him, personally chop off his head. He still walked towards Junliuye. His subordinates didn't dare to stop him. Just to be safe, one of them suddenly raised his hand and shot a flying knife at Junliuye on the ground. He wanted him to die more thoroughly. Clang! Star Moon country's king raised his finger and sent out a strong wind towards the flying knife. The knife turned in the air and fell to the ground. Who asked you to be a busybody? Star Moon country's king's face was as calm as water. If you act recklessly again, behead. He wanted to take this person's life personally. Only then would there be a sense of accomplishment. His guards didn't dare to make any more moves. They looked at Junliuye. His vital point had been hit and blood had already dyed his clothes red. Even if he didn't die, he was on his last breath. His chest was barely moving up and down. This person had been blinded by beauty and didn't bring a single guard with him to the depths of the mountain. Now that he was so heavily injured, even if they didn't go and stab him, he wouldn't be able to live. These people finally relaxed and their gazes fell on Jiyu. She had been sitting there the whole time, as if her soul had been hollowed out. She looked at the moon in the sky without moving. At this time, no one cared about her. She didn't care about anyone either. Star Moon Country's king finally arrived in front of Jun Luyi and looked down at his dying face. His lips curled slightly. Jun Luyi, are you unwilling to die like this? On the ground, Jun Luyi didn't move and didn't react at all. Star Moon Country's king slowly pulled out his saber. It was a sharp blade that could cut through iron like mud. As long as it was swung out, not to mention Jun Luyi's head, even a lump of iron would be cut in half. The saber light reflected the moonlight and flashed. Jiyu, who was sitting in a daze, seemed to be disturbed by the saber light. She suddenly raised her eyes and looked over. After seeing what the monarch of Xingyu country was doing, her pupil shrank as she immediately saw through his intentions. Her body flashed, and she suddenly pounced on him. What are you doing? Her petite body stood in front of Jun Luyi. You won't be able to live. You're not allowed to disgrace the corpse. She hated him and wanted to kill him, but she couldn't just stand by and watch as his corpse was dismembered. The king of Star Moon Country narrowed his eyes and said softly, Jiyu, there is only one way for me to verify a person's death, and that is to cut off his head. Be good and move aside. Jiyu's face paled. You are the ruler of a country, don't go too far. Before she could finish her sentence, she felt her waist tighten as someone hugged her from behind. Before she could react, her whole body suddenly soared into the air. From the corner of her eyes, she saw several cold lights flashing. Several streaks of blood and a scream pierced the sky. Jiyu was dumbfounded. She had already sensed that someone was hugging her. Although her back was facing that person, her nose could smell the unique fragrance of cold plum blossoms and the faint smell of blood on his body. She could even feel her back quickly becoming wet and sticky. Chapter 2601. Jun Luyi. He didn't die. In fact, he wasn't even seriously injured, because just from the explosive power of him carrying her and swinging his sword, it was definitely not something that a seriously injured person who was on the verge of death could do. Jiyu's lifeless gaze landed on the snowy ground, where another person had fallen. He had a jade face and red lips, and his clothes were as white as snow. The jade crown on his head was gone, because half of his head was missing. The Star Moon Country's monarch was originally going to cut off someone else's head, but now his head had been cut off. Everything happened too quickly, too suddenly, and too unexpectedly. The elite subordinates didn't even have time to rescue him, and they could only watch helplessly as half of the monarch's head was cut off. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! These people cried out in shock and went mad with anger. With a shout, they moved together, wanting to pounce on Jun Luyi and fight him to the death. The snowy ground under their feet suddenly softened, and dozens of figures rushed out from the snow like ghosts. The figures flickered continuously, and in the blink of an eye, the elites were trapped in the middle. Jiyu widened her eyes and looked at the people who suddenly appeared. They were dressed in the attire of the Wuxia country's secret guards, and there were a few familiar faces among them. They were all elite assassins from the Dark Shadow Tower. Needless to say, these were Jun Luyi's men. They were already prepared, and he had already made arrangements. The assassins from the Dark Shadow Tower were all top-notch experts. The moment they appeared, they killed a few of the Star Moon Country's guards nearby, and a few more corpses appeared on the ground. These people surrounded the remaining 10 people in the middle and pointed their swords at them, forcing them to surrender. The Star Moon Country's monarch was already dead, and these people were like a group of dragons without a leader. Now that they were surrounded, logically speaking, they should surrender and seek a way out. However, they didn't expect these people to be so loyal, and had no intention of surrendering at this time. One of them shouted loudly, "If the monarch dies, the subjects should also die. Brothers, we'd rather die for our country than betray His Majesty. That's right. Let's fight it out with them. Killing one is enough, and killing two is a profit. Yes, we'd rather die than be subjects of a fallen country." Jun Luyi's men did not expect these people to be so courageous. The leader looked at Jun Luyi and said, "Your Majesty." Junlioye stood there and glanced at those people. He only said a few words. Let them be. He took a step back and used his sleeve to cover Jiyu's eyes. He said softly, "Don't look." The massacre had scared her out of her wits, and he didn't want her to experience the same thing again. Jiyu didn't resist in his arms. She seemed to have accepted her fate, but it also seemed that she hadn't completely reacted. His sleeves covered her eyes, so she couldn't see the bloody scene. However, he could hear the sound of swords piercing into flesh, as well as the muffled groans of people on the verge of death. "Your Majesty, let this humble servant take a look at your injuries." Two shadow guards had been waiting by Junlioye's side for a long time, anxiously wanting to examine his injuries. Not only were these two people skilled in martial arts, they were also experts in treating all kinds of internal and external injuries. They also served as imperial physicians in the army. Although Junlioye's sword strike looked dangerous, he had been prepared beforehand. He had used his Xian Qi to slightly adjust the vital organs in his body. Therefore, the sword strike had only left a flesh wound. Not even a single bone had been damaged. However, he was still made of flesh and blood. Even if it was only a flesh wound, it was still very painful. Moreover, he had lost so much blood. Chapter 2602. Even with his strong body, his forehead was covered in cold sweat. His arms were weak, and he could barely hold on to Jiyu. But he did not want to let go. "Your Majesty, the Empress is not injured. Why don't you put her down first? Your Majesty's injury must be treated in time." Although the two shadow guards spoke politely, their eyes were fixed on Jiyu, guarding against her stabbing the Lord again. After all, her attack just now was ruthless and ruthless. She did not hold back at all. If not for the Lord's peerless martial arts and the ability to change his acupoints without batting an eyelid, that stab would have taken the Lord's life. At that time, they were watching from underground and were so shocked that they almost jumped out. If not for the Lord's strict orders to not act rashly unless it was a critical moment, they would have jumped out at that time. His Majesty is truly taking risks. It's too thrilling. An empress who assassinates her husband should be punished with 9 familial extermination. Junlioye did not care. He had already sealed his own acupoints to stop the bleeding. His eyes swept over the two shadow guards. "I am fine. Don't worry about me. Go help them." "Your Majesty. Your Majesty." The two shadow guards were unwilling to give up. "This is a military order." Junlioye's voice turned cold. The two shadow guards had no choice but to join the battle. Before they left, they were still worried. "Your Majesty, please be careful." Two sharp gazes swept over Jiyu. It goes without saying who should be careful. Junlioye ignored them. He hugged Jiyu and took a step back. Sitting on a large rock, he watched the battle. The battle was nearing its end. Although Xingyue's guards were top experts, they were no match for the enemy. Moreover, the experts here were all abnormal and not easy to deal with. One by one, people fell down. The smell of blood on the peak became thicker and thicker. Junlioye let out a sigh of relief, and the corners of his lips curled up. Killing Xingyue's emperor was equivalent to destroying Xingyue. Breaking into the city was just around the corner. The day of victory and return to the city was not far away. Clap, clap. Jiyu and his arms suddenly clapped twice. "Your Majesty really has a good plan." Junlioye choked and looked down at her. "Jiyu." Jiyu's face was as white as snow, but her small mouth was curled into a smile. "Your Majesty, your goal has been achieved, so there's no need for this affectionate play anymore, right?" Her tone was calm, but her words were as sharp as a knife. Junlioye's body stiffened, as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water over him. Jiyu took the opportunity to roll out of his embrace and landed on the ground. His movements had also alarmed the few shadow guards who had been eyeing him covetously. As soon as Jiyu moved, 2 shadow guards rushed over and said, "Don't hurt His Majesty." One of the guards was impatient and made the first move, slashing his saber towards Jiyu. The princess of a fallen country was a scourge. He would get rid of her for His Majesty. Clang! After an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing, the saber in the guard's hand was sent flying, almost cutting his own neck. He was so shocked that he took 2 steps back. Your Majesty, this woman cannot be allowed to live. Junliu's face was also pale from the shock. He sheathed his sword and coldly said, You dare to assassinate the Empress. Are you seeking death? Your Majesty, this woman is the princess of a fallen country. If she stays by your Majesty's side, she must have other intentions. We must guard against her. The guard threw caution to the wind and said what most of the other guards were thinking. The other guards secretly nodded. Chapter 2603. It was fine when this woman was crazy. At least she didn't have any self-awareness and wouldn't harm His Majesty. But now that she's back to normal and is clearly here for revenge, how can they be at ease letting such a woman stay by His Majesty's side? If it weren't for Junliu's prestige, these people would have tried to persuade him. Junliu's face darkened. How can you interfere in the Empress affairs? If you say another word, I'll punish you according to military law. His body has a terrifying aura. Although these people are unwilling, they don't dare to say another word. They all secretly stare at Jiyu, their eyes alert. Jiyu has already stood up, and her gaze swept over the crowd. The battle is already over. Corpses are scattered all over the ground, and blood has dyed most of the ice peak red. It's a ghastly sight. Most of these corpses are from Star Moon Country. They originally came to ambush Junliu, but they didn't expect to be ambushed by him and be completely wiped out. Junliu has won another big battle, right? He used the trick of injuring himself to gain the enemy's confidence and killed the enemy's emperor, obtaining a crucial victory. And she planned for several days, endured for several days, but she didn't think that all her schemes would be transparent in his eyes. She used up all her tricks, but in the end, the one who helped him was still him. This person is worthy of being the invincible Azura war god. His use of military tactics has reached perfection. I'm not his opponent at all. Useless. I'm really useless. My life is like a joke. A joke that I'm only being used by others. Her gaze falls on Junliu. His blue robe is mottled with blood, but his spirit is very good. His eyes are shining, his posture is tall and proud, and he looks like he has a card up his sleeve. His iron-blooded guards surrounded him. They had just killed the other party's king, so they were feeling very refreshed. Jiyu suddenly smiles and cups her hands towards Junliu. Your Majesty, congratulations, you've won again. He's too smart. No matter when, he's always the winner. She's not his opponent, no matter how hard she tries. She will never win against him again in this life, and she doesn't want to win. Jiyu, what's there to talk about winning or losing between us? We never wanted to win against you. This time, we only wanted to calm you down and beat you at your own game. Junliu took a step forward and spoke. He didn't know why, but her smile made his heart sink, as if something was leaving him. He reached out to pull her. Jiyu, let's go back. I will explain everything to you. He would tell her about her parents, but not now. That matter was too confidential. It was best not to speak of it in front of so many subordinates, lest it spread back to the court and cause unnecessary disputes. She had regained her sanity, which was great. He would explain everything to her when he got back, and if necessary, he would take her to see her parents. Jiyu took a step back, avoiding him as if he was a snake or a scorpion. Her face became paler and paler. She smiled and shook her head. There's nothing to explain. The enmity of the destruction of his country and the enmity of his parents was there. He had clearly been used time and time again. What else was there to explain? From the beginning to the end, she was just a pitiful worm who was being used by others. Fortunately, her useless life was about to come to an end, so she wasn't afraid of being used by him again. Her smile was too old. Her smile was too despairing. That smile could even be called empty, making Junliu's heart feel like it was hit by something. Chapter 2604. He had never seen Jiyu like this before. Even when she found out that he had used her to destroy Jiyu, she did not despair to this extent. Jiyu, you have a lot of misunderstandings about me. Come back with me, and I will slowly explain everything to you. He suddenly took a step forward and ignored her attempts to avoid him. He grabbed her hand and pulled her into his embrace. Hugging her tightly, as if this was the only way for him to feel a sense of reality. Ji did not move an inch and let him hug her. Her body was unusually cold, and even if he hugged her like this, he could not warm her up at all. Your Majesty, her face doesn't look right. A shadow guard who knew medicine suddenly shouted. Junlioya stiffened and loosened his grip on her body slightly. He looked at her face, and his heart suddenly sank. Her face was so pale that there was no trace of blood, but now there was a faint layer of pink on her cheeks like peach blossoms. Her lips were also a faint shade of pink, glistening like water. Her complexion was very good and her entire body looked soft and tender, as if she was still that little princess who did not know the dangers of the world, walking in the spring with flowers blooming. Her body was clearly as cold as snow, so it was normal for her face to be pale. But now, what did she do? Junlioya's fingers trembled as he held her arms tightly and stared into her eyes. Ji, what did you eat? When he was cuddling with her earlier, he had also secretly checked her body. Other than the dagger, she did not have any dangerous items on her. When he kissed her, he had even used his tongue to sweep her teeth. There were no drugs hidden in her teeth like those assassins. Logically speaking, she should not have had any opportunity to take any drugs. But her current appearance was extremely abnormal, as if she had been poisoned. Impossible. She could not have taken any drugs. She had no chance. Perhaps there was another reason. His palm quickly pressed against her back, and his inner energy quickly flowed through her body, trying to find out what was wrong with her body. There was indeed something wrong with her body. The blood in her body was circulating twice as fast as usual, and when his inner energy rushed in, it seemed to have triggered some kind of mechanism, causing her blood to circulate even faster. Even faster. Her body trembled slightly, and she spat out a mouthful of blood with a cry. Junlioya's expression changed as he hurriedly withdrew his palm and hugged her limp body, his fingers trembling slightly. Damn it, she had taken poison. He must have taken poison. She wanted to die. She actually wanted to die. She had tried so hard to live, but now she was seeking death. Furthermore, it caught him off guard. Don't worry. His blood was the antidote to hundreds of poisons. He would not allow her to die. Without his permission, she would not die. He touched her short sword and cut his palm in front of everyone's shocked cries. Blood gushed out, and he brought his palm close to her lips. He forced open her teeth and poured the blood into her mouth. She wanted to resist, but her body was too weak to break free from his grip on her chin. She coughed and coughed up more than half of the blood that she had poured into her mouth. Don't cough. Drink it. Ji, drink it. Junlioya leaned over and kissed her on the lips, forcing her to swallow the blood. This was a kiss without any demands. Her lips were cold and soft while his trembling lips were strong. The taste of blood spread in their mouths. Junlioya forced her to drink 2 mouthfuls of blood. Chapter 2605. Afraid that it wasn't enough, he raised his sword to cut again, as the blood flow from the wound on his palm gradually decreased. Your Majesty, that's enough. 1 drop of your blood can cure 100 poisons. There's no need for so much. A shadow guard rushed over and grabbed the sword with all his might. Yes, Your Majesty. Your blood is hot and her body is weak. Drinking too much will make her look bad. Another shadow guard also rushed over. Junlioya stopped cutting his hand and waved away the 2 shadow guards. He held Jiyu in his arms and stared at her beautiful face. Once the poison was cured, her complexion would return to normal. He would rather see her pale than see her as beautiful and lively as she was now. It was like the final radiance of the setting sun. Then he was disappointed. Jiyu's face turned even redder, as if peach blossoms had bloomed on her cheeks. Her lips were still stained with his blood. Her red lips were full, giving her a soul-stirring beauty. She didn't look at him from beginning to end. Her eyes stared blankly at the moon in the sky as her breathing gradually weakened. The poison wasn't cured. His blood wasn't useful either. His gaze was like a knife as he looked at one of the shadow guards. Can you tell what kind of poison she was poisoned with? This shadow guard was an expert from a family that specialized in poisons. His poison skills were superb, and his detoxification skills were naturally not to be underestimated. He was Junlioya's right-hand man, and also his personal doctor. The shadow guard's face was pale. He opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something but didn't dare. Speak. Jun Liuya was impatient. Your Majesty, looking at her symptoms, it seems to be the legendary peach blossom tragedy. The shadow guard spoke with difficulty. Peach blossom tragedy? Jun Liuya's heart seemed to sink to the bottom of the sea. After all, he had been on the battlefield for many years, and had heard of this peach blossom tragedy. It was a legendary poison that was created using the peach blossom miasma and other poisons. Once the poison flared up, the victim's face would become like a peach blossom, and their body would gradually lose strength. In the end, they would die of exhaustion. Jun Liuya had only heard of this poison occasionally, and had never seen it before. How can this poison be cured? Jun Liuya gritted his teeth. The shadow guard shook his head with a face full of shame. This subordinate has only heard of the symptoms of this poison. It's said that there's no antidote. His voice became softer. Jun Liuya's head exploded. His body swayed slightly as his vision turned black. No antidote. In the end, he's still going to lose her? No way. He had clearly taken care of everything, and was in control of everything. She shouldn't have died. He can't die. He didn't believe it. He did not believe that there was no cure. How did she get this strange poison? Who gave it to her? Perhaps the person who gave her this poison had a way to detoxify it. He had to find out who had poisoned him. Jun Liuya seemed to have finally grasped onto a life-saving straw as he held Ji Yu's arm tightly. Ji Yu, tell me who gave you this poison. We have to get the antidote from him. I will save you. Ji Yu still didn't look at him. She didn't even blink. Obviously, she had no desire to live, and was waiting for death. Jun Liuya held her body tightly and suppressed the panic in his heart. He tried his best to remain calm, and forced her to look into his eyes. Ji Yu, you've misunderstood me. I didn't kill your parents. The one I killed was a substitute. Your parents are still alive and well. Don't you want to see them? If you live on, I'll take you to see them when we return. Ji Yu's eyes finally slowly turned and landed on his face. Her eyes flashed with ridicule. Her little mouth opened and closed a few times before she softly spat out 3 words. I don't believe it. Chapter 2606. She would never believe a single word of his ever again. It's true. Ji Yu, as long as you survive, you'll be able to see them. I promise you. I swear. Ji Yu slowly closed her eyes. At this point, she no longer believed in anyone, much less him. The poison had already taken effect. All the meridians in her body felt like they were burning. Her forehead was dripping with sweat, but there was a smile of relief on her lips. It was finally going to end. She was tired. She was really tired. Since she couldn't take revenge, she wouldn't do it. She just wanted to be free. Her breathing began to quicken. The peach blossom on her face became more vibrant, and a faint pink color filled her eyes. Jun Liuya panicked. His face was pale as he hugged her. This was the first time he was at a loss. Your Majesty, Her Highness. She once worked with people from Xingyue country. Could this poison have been given to her by the king of Xingyue country? One of the guards was still very meticulous. He voiced his guess. Search. Search their bodies. Don't let a single piece of cloth go. Jun Liuya was practically shouting. He was no longer as calm as before. All the corpses were searched from head to toe. A pile of medicine bottles and sachets were found. 2 shadow guards with high medical skills quickly checked the medicine. However, they were quickly disappointed. The medicine was common medicine like golden sore medicine. There wasn't any medicine that could cure the peach blossom sorrow. Ji Yu's body in his arms was getting colder and colder. Jun Liuya hugged her like he was hugging a lump of ice. He staggered up with her in his arms. He wanted to carry her down the mountain. He wanted to bring her to the miracle doctor. He wanted to save her. Your Majesty, the poisoned person can't move on their own. You can't use your energy to expel the poison. Otherwise, the poison will spread even faster. The guard reminded him. Jun Liuya suddenly looked up. His eyes were about to spit fire. Then what do we do? Was he supposed to watch her die? Your Majesty, I heard that if the poisoned person has a strong desire to live, Then with a set of detoxification treatment, they can have a chance of survival. The guard didn't dare to be slow. Without waiting for Junliuya to ask, he quickly explained the steps of the treatment. Junliuya acted as if he had found a treasure. He immediately pressed his palm on a certain meridian on Jiyu's back and sent his chi in, wanting to save her life. To use this method, Jiyu must use her own internal energy. Junliuya's true energy entered her heart meridian, trying to forcefully stimulate the true energy in her body. But it was futile. Jiyu, cooperate with me. Be good and listen to me. You can't die. Jiyu, be good. Cooperate with me, and let me expel the poison from your body. As long as you survive, I will restore Jiyu Kingdom, and let your father ascend the throne. Nothing will change. Junliuya's voice was hoarse, and his eyes were bloodshot as he desperately made a wish to her. 1,000 deaths. Jiyu's small mouth opened, suddenly muttering 2 words. I'm here, Jiyu, I'm here. Pull yourself together. Even though it was Junliuya's first time using such a treatment method, he used his inner energy perfectly. He condensed it into a line and moved it around Jiyu's body, trying his best to get her to cooperate. Jiyu slightly opened her eyes and fixed her gaze on Junliuya's face. She seemed to be in a dazed and empty state. No, you're not 1,000 deaths. He's already dead. In my heart, he's already dead. Junliuya's fingers trembled slightly. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. Jiyu, I know you hate me. When you're better, I'll let you kill me, okay? Give me one more chance. Jiyu, give me one more chance. Chapter 2607. Jiyu's eyelashes fluttered, her eyes empty. No, I don't hate you. I only hate myself. Hate herself for being so foolish. Hate herself for loving the wrong person. Hate herself for not being able to let go even though she knew the other party was an enemy. Previously, she was indeed crazy. Her days were chaotic, and she could not hear anything that others said to her. Until the godly doctor from Xinhua country treated her for 4 days. Although her insanity was not completely cured, because the treatment was not completed, she could still sense little bits and pieces of the outside world. Occasionally, she could even hear the voices of the outside world. After Junliuya left, she didn't know when, but her usually muddled mind suddenly cleared up a little. Fragments of the past began to float in her mind. Although she couldn't piece them together, she knew that she was the princess of Jiyu country and had been kidnapped here. She even remembered that she had a fiancé that she liked. Although she could not remember what he looked like, she remembered that he had once said that he wanted to marry her. She did not want to stay in the palace, did not want to be the empress. She was very afraid and wanted to go home. But she also knew that those people would not let her go. She began to pay attention to the layout of the palace, and slowly, she could remember most of it. The people who served her in the palace were on guard against external enemies. They did not guard against the crazy her at all, so she escaped easily. When she came outside, she bumped into the king of Star Moon country in disguise. Or perhaps he had been waiting there all along. The king restrained her and placed a pearl between her eyebrows for an hour. While she felt the coolness of the pearl, she finally regained all her consciousness and memories. Her heart fell into an icy hell. Her parents died tragically in front of her, and the scene of blood spurting out seemed like yesterday. She knew that Junliuya had risked universal condemnation to make her the empress, and she also knew that he was good to her. But these good things could not offset the blood that had been spilled. The hatred of killing her parents was irreconcilable. She must take revenge. So she and the king of Star Moon country hit it off and made this plan. She had come to this point and no longer had any thoughts of living. She asked the king of Star Moon country for poison, preparing to take the poison and commit suicide after she got it, ending all troubles. The king of Star Moon nation gave her a peach blossom sorrow and told her that this medicine had a special characteristic. She could take it a day in advance. After taking it, as long as she did not use any special method to activate it, the poison would not act up. It could even be expelled using a special method. However, once the poison was activated, it would take effect, and the person would die within an hour. At that time, the king of Star Moon country said with a smile that he would give her a chance to change her mind. Not only did he teach her how to make the poison flare up, he also taught her how to expel the poison from her body before it flared up. Ji Yu had taken the poison a day earlier. She was determined to kill Jun Luyi for revenge. In order to cover up her lie, she purposely pretended to have amnesia. This was the only way Jun Luoya would not be on guard against her, and would not be suspicious of her deliberate approach. Her plan was very good, and her acting was also not bad. It could be said that she had performed exceptionally. She thought that her heart was already as hard as iron, and that she would not be moved by anything anymore. But when she was really with him, the surprise he had when he saw her, and the unguarded kindness he had shown her had struck her heart. She couldn't bear to do it. She had several chances to plot against him, but she could not bear to let them go. This time, she finally made her move. Chapter 2608. For the last time, she finally made her move. The moment she saw him slowly fall, her heart seemed to collapse along with him. The pain was bone-piercing. It was also painful and empty. She had finally killed him. She had finally avenged her parents. But she did not feel the slightest bit of joy. All she felt was pain. It was an overwhelming pain that almost engulfed her entire being. She sat on the ground and activated the death of Peach Blossom in her body. Since they could not be together in life, then she would let them die together. By killing him, she would not let down her parents who had died tragically. By committing suicide, she would not let down her love, and she would not let him down. She thought that this was the end between them, but she did not think that this was also his plan. He had long seen through her disguise. In order to lure out the Star Moon country's ruler, he had pretended to be polite, and did not hesitate to use the trick of injuring himself to gain her confidence. This move of his was not just a little bit beautiful. It was his style. She had no choice but to admit defeat. Using schemes in front of him was no different from showing off in front of a master. In his eyes, she was probably just a clown who thought too highly of herself. She was a failure, a complete and utter failure. As matters stood, she did not hate him. She really did not hate him. She only hated her own stupidity. Fortunately, this sad life of hers was about to end. She no longer needed to live such a tiring and complicated life. Jun Luyi was still shouting something in her ear, but she could not hear it clearly. She could only faintly feel that his voice was a little sharp and hoarse, causing her eardrums to hurt from the vibrations. She could even feel the warmth of his chest. It was so thick and so warm. She could also feel the hot tears dripping onto her face and the corner of her lips. It was salty and astringent. She vaguely thought that there were times when he lost his composure like this. He would also shout and speak so loudly. Perhaps he still had a little bit of love for her. He wasn't completely heartless towards her, was he? However, none of this was important to her. Her eyes began to blur, and her head began to feel dizzy. It was as if she saw the peach blossoms bloom and wither and bloom again. In the midst of the blossoming peach blossoms, she saw her lover in a purple robe slowly walking over. He smiled at her and called her little moon. Qianshang. Her little mouth muttered a few words. Her empty eyes slightly lit up as she struggled to reach her hand out to him. Unable to reverse the situation, Jun Luoya could only watch as her breathing grew weaker and weaker. His blood-stained hand gripped her cold one tightly, as if he could slow her down by doing so. "Ji Yu, hang in there, don't die," he roared at the top of his lungs. His voice, which had almost changed its pitch, reverberated through the snowy peak, causing the snow to begin to slide down. However, Ji Yu could no longer hear it. She had completely fallen into an illusion. "Qianshang, take me away. You said you would marry me. I've been waiting for you this entire time. I even personally prepared the wedding dress." She spat out a few more words before slowly closing her eyes. A single tear finally fell from the corner of her eye. In the end, she didn't have the chance to wear the wedding dress that she had prepared herself. The girl's colorful dream was shattered in the cruel reality. So this was the cause of Ji Yu's death. So this was how she died. Ning Xuemo watched all of this from the sky. She watched as the beautiful girl took her last breath in Jun Luoya's arms. Her eyes never opened again. Although she had long known that Ji Yu would die, seeing it happen with her own eyes, Her heart still felt heavy, as if it was filled with lead. Shunjuli held her hand and was about to say something when a gust of wind suddenly blew in the sky. The world turned gray, as if the sky was about to collapse. What's going on? Ning Xuemo raised her head. Let's go out. Shunjuli decisively made his move, setting up a barrier around him and Ning Xuemo. Chapter 2609. As soon as the enchantment was set up, the world around them began to collapse. The mountains were toppling, the sky was turning upside down, and the seawater that came out of nowhere crashed towards Ning Xuemo and the others. Ning Xuemo only felt her vision blur, and her body suddenly felt heavy. She felt as if she was stepping on solid ground. She opened her eyes and gently exhaled. She was out of the dream. She was still in the ice cave. Shunjuli stood beside her, holding her hand. Are you okay? He quickly used his telekinesis to check her body. After confirming that she was indeed fine, he let go of her hand and hugged her waist instead. Ning Xuemo's heart warmed. The great god was really considerate. The great god was the one who took the initiative to enter her memories. Ning Xuemo was also afraid that he would be injured, so she carefully looked at him. Seeing that he was fine, she was relieved. When she turned around, she saw that Jun Liuye's face was extremely pale. He was staring at the ice coffin in a daze, and a line of blood slowly flowed down from the corner of his mouth. He is. Ning Xuemo stepped forward. The memory was too tragic. It shook his heart, so he vomited blood. Shunjuli explained briefly. Their conversation woke Jun Liuye from his daze. He immediately looked at them. The two of you. Ning Xuemo waved her hand. We read your memories and know the ins and outs of the matter. Let me ask you, how are Jiyu's parents now? Jun Liuye closed his eyes and sighed. I originally arranged for them to live in seclusion in a beautiful place. I wanted to let them reunite after Jiyu recovered, but I didn't expect that Jiyu. When news of Jiyu's death reached them, they couldn't take it and fell ill. They both passed away a year ago. Ning Xuemo was speechless. The life and death of Jiyu's parents was the key to whether Jiyu could continue living in this world. Now that even they were dead, even if the great god performed a miracle and revived Jiyu, would she be able to live happily? Grand Tutor, now that you know the truth, can you revive her? Jun Liuye stared at Shunjuli, as if he was his last hope. Shunjuli looked at the ice coffin, and didn't answer his question. Instead he asked, after she died, who told you that there was hope for her to come back to life? Who told you to preserve her body this way? There were no immortal cultivators in this world. After people died, they were either buried or simply cremated. No one had ever thought of resurrecting a dead person. Naturally, no one would think of preserving the corpse. Not only had Jun Liuye preserved it, he had preserved it exceptionally well. Even this method of preserving corpses should not exist in this world. Jun Liuye was taken aback by Shunjuli's question. After a while he replied, this was something we came up with. We feel that she can be revived, but we can't enter the door. We can only preserve her body like this for now. Shunjuli looked at him with a complicated gaze. It was as if something he had suspected for a long time had been confirmed. He silently counted with his fingers in his sleeves and didn't say anything. Jun Liuye looked at him carefully and asked, Grand Tutor, do you have a way? Shunjuli slowly shook his head, and finally spat out two words. No. Jun Liuye staggered, his face turning even paler. He blurted out, how can there not be? Doesn't Grand Tutor have the ability to bring people back to life? Even if a person's soul is scattered, Grand Tutor can still bring them back to life. Why is there no way now? She's only dead, her soul isn't scattered. Chapter 2610. This Lord only said that I might be able to bring someone back to life. Who told you that this Lord can also bring someone back to life, even if their soul is scattered? Shunjulu questioned. Jun Liuye. This. Indeed, no one had told him this before, but he was certain of it in his subconscious, and was extremely sure of it. It was as if he had known Shunjuli from the start. Just like the method to preserve Jiyu's body, he had learned it himself. Imperial Tutor's meaning. Could it be that you also have no other way? Jun Luye's voice trembled slightly, but he forced himself to calm down. Imperial Tutor is omnipotent. Even deities can be brought back to life, let alone a mortal. She only died from poison, her soul did not disappear. There must be a way to save her, right? Shenjuli's gaze turned sharp. Do you know what oath Princess Ji Yu made to Ziyu in her heart when she pledged her life to you in Huayu restaurant? What oath? I believed that Qianshang loved me, so I swore in the name of Jiyu country's princess that I would be with him forever. If I went against it, my body and soul would disappear. Shenjuli calmly repeated Jiyu's oath. Jun Luyi staggered a step. He never thought that Jiyu would make such an oath under such circumstances. At that time, he only treated her as an innocent child and did not truly love her. So? Cold sweat dripped down Jun Luye's forehead. His voice trembled slightly as he refused to believe this fact. You went against your oath. She also went against her oath, so her body and soul disappeared. Her soul is no longer here. Shenjuli coldly stated the truth. How could she be revived without her soul? Even the omnipotent Shenjuli could not do anything about it. Ji was really dead and could not be revived. That girl had completely disappeared from this world. No matter what he did, she would never come back. From generation to generation, forever and ever. Even if he reincarnated, he would never meet her again. When Shenjuli announced this result, Junliuya felt as if he had been ruthlessly pierced by something. His pale face was devoid of blood, and his eyes were blank. He staggered a few steps and slowly he sat down. Snowy peaks stood in great numbers, and ice towers were everywhere. The sky was filled with ice and snow, and the weather seemed to be even colder. Ning Xuema and Shenjuli walked side by side on the snowy road down the mountain. Great God, is Jiyu really hopeless? Ning Xuema turned her head to look at the ice peak that was gradually disappearing into the distance. She didn't know what to feel in her heart. She thought that she could help this pair be together, but who would have thought? She is no longer in this world, including her soul. Shenjuli answered briefly. What do you mean? Was her soul really gone? Logically speaking, she only died from consuming poison. That kind of poison can at most take a person's life, but it can't disperse a person's soul, right? His soul didn't scatter but disappeared. Poison doesn't scatter the soul, but vows to scatter the soul. Shenjuli spoke like an old monk, full of Buddhist wisdom. Ning Xuema's understanding of Buddhism was not high, so she was too lazy to think about it. She only knew that Princess Jiyu would never come back. Great God, you said that Jiyu had completely disappeared. Then how can you still read her memories? I thought that only the soul could. That is only an obsession attached to her body, not a soul. Then what about Junliuya? Ning Xuema turned her head to look at the ice peak. When she and the great god came out, Junliuya had been sitting there in a daze, without any intention of following them. Chapter 26:11. Ning Xuema knew that he had suffered a great blow, and needed some time to calm down. There are gains and losses. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Shenjuli's voice was faint, but his words hit the nail on the head. Ning Xuema nodded slightly inside. Junliuya was a man of great talent and strategy. Perhaps in his heart, he had always prioritized the country. He had indeed won the world, but he had also completely lost her. Love did not hold much weight in an emperor's heart. Perhaps he would be able to walk out of it soon. It was just like what she had read in a modern romance novel. Ruling over a vast country, enjoying endless loneliness. He had chosen this path himself, so he could only continue walking down it himself. Speaking of which, great God, I keep feeling that Junliuya is somewhat familiar, as if I've seen him somewhere before. But I can swear that this is the first time I've seen him. Perhaps, this isn't the first time you've seen him. Perhaps you've interacted with him before. Shenjuli raised a hand to ruffle her hair. This world isn't that big. The great god had begun to meditate again. Ning Xuema was too lazy to waste her time thinking. She was now worried about another problem. Great God, if this is your second task, then does this mean that we've failed? Shenjuli pondered for a moment. That's hard to say. He turned to look at the mountain peak in the distance. This depends on the emperor's choice. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes sparkled, You're saying that they still have hope? Shinjuli smiled but did not answer. Ning Xuema also knew that it was inconvenient for the great god to say too much when it came to matters of the heavens. She did not press him any further. She was about to say something when she suddenly sensed something and raised her head. Dark clouds gathered in the sky. The inky black clouds rolled in like a tide, covering the entire sky in the blink of an eye. The sky was dark, as if it was the end of the world. Crack! A golden bolt of lightning struck down from the sky, cutting a mountain peak in the distance. With a loud bang, half of the mountain collapsed. What was going on? Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in a world of ice and snow. Could it be that there were spirits or monsters in the mountains that were about to undergo a heavenly tribulation? Streak after streak of lightning struck down like a dancing golden snake. Endless rumbling sounds could be heard as all of the mountain peaks suffered the calamity and collapsed along with the lightning. Mountains crumbled and the earth cracked. The mountain was about to collapse. Fuck. Wasn't the heavenly lightning very accurate when a fae transcended its tribulation? If he only used his strength on the tribulation transcendence fae, he would not harm the surrounding flowers and plants. But now, it was as if the entire mountain was undergoing a tribulation. Could it be that this snow mountain had become a spirit? It can't be. With the Almighty by her side and Ning Xuema's high level of kung fu, even if the sky collapsed, she wouldn't be hurt. She suddenly turned around and ran back. Shinjuli grabbed her and asked, "Where are you going?" Jun Liuye is still in that cave. With the mountains collapsing and the earth cracking, he better not be buried inside. Although his attributes are a bit trash, he is still a wise emperor. We still have to save him. Let's do a good deed today. Ning Xuema had just said this when she suddenly froze. A golden bolt of lightning as thick as a pot lid swayed down from the sky and struck the tallest mountain peak. The loud sound of thunder shook the entire world. After the lightning passed, the mountain peak disappeared. No, it was instantly flattened. Such a tall mountain peak was actually flattened by a bolt of lightning. Chapter 26:12. And the ice cave where Jiyu's body was hidden was on top of the mountain. Great God, go save him. Ning Xuema pulled Shinjuli and ran. Logically speaking, the people in the cave shouldn't have been able to survive after the landslide. But Jun Liuye was not an ordinary person. He was the male lead here, not to mention that his martial arts were abnormally high. That person, aside from not knowing any spells, was at the peak of perfection in all other aspects. He clearly surpassed the settings of an ordinary person in this world. Just like the great god, he belonged to an abnormal species. How could such a person die in this landslide? Shinjuli pulled Ning Xuema into his arms and smiled. You care about him that much? Ning Xuema pressed her hand on his shoulder. Great God, I'll have to trouble you to put away your vinegar bottle first. Saving people is more important. Shinjuli didn't move and continued to tease her. Xuema, you're the devil lord. Yet you're even more merciful than a deity. Did I train you? Train your ass. Ning Xuema said, Great God, he's the emperor of this continent. He can be considered the #1 person. He followed you and me up the mountain. At that time, his subjects all saw it. If he dies here, you and I won't have a good time when we go down. They'll treat us like jinx and beat us up. You don't want to live like a street rat, right? Be good and listen to me. Let's go save him first. At this time, he might be lying in a crack in a rock waiting for you to save him. She pulled his arm and pulled him forward. She felt that walking was too slow, so she simply pulled him and flew. She flew into the air like a gust of wind. Suddenly, she seemed to realize something and suddenly stopped her cloud steps. The result of this sudden stop was that Shinjuli, who was pulled by her, directly crashed into her body. If he didn't quickly catch her, she would have been sent flying in a parabola. What's wrong? Shinjuli helped her up and then took a step back. He crossed his arms and looked at her. I can actually fly. My psychokinesis has been restored. Ning Xuema was in disbelief. She even moved her arms and legs. Congratulations. Shinjuli congratulated her without much sincerity. Ning Xuema was still confused, but now was not the time to think about these things. She was still thinking about saving people. She pulled Shinjuli's hand and said, "Guru, don't talk nonsense here. Let's get the emperor out first." Shinjuli pointed down with his chin. "Take a look. Is there any other way?" Ning Xuema looked down, and her head buzzed. In just a few moments, the snowy mountain that had been filled with mountains had completely disappeared. Below it was a vast expanse of white snow, and not a single trace of its former appearance could be seen. This is an entire mountain. It actually disappeared just like that without leaving any trace behind. It was too strange. Under such circumstances, trying to find someone who was originally hiding in the cave was undoubtedly like looking for a needle in a haystack. Moreover, that person was most likely not there anymore. Ning Xuema decisively grabbed the guru's arm. "Guru, it looks like you'll have to revive Jun Luyi." Fortunately, he was crushed to death by the mountain, so his soul didn't scatter. "Help him summon a soul and create a body." She said it as if he could create a person out of mud. Shinjuli chuckled. His soul should also be gone. The guru's expression actually looked a bit happy. Ning Xuemo raised her eyebrows and looked at him. "Guru, was this what you expected?" Chapter 26:13. Shinjuli put an arm on her shoulder and said lazily, "It seems that this is his choice." That's good. Everything is back on track." Ning Xuema crossed her arms and waited for him to explain. Master. Two figures, one red and one blue, came from afar and flew to the two of them in the blink of an eye. It was Kirin and Little Phoenix. The two beasts looked flustered. Little Phoenix asked a series of questions. "Master, are you okay? We heard the commotion from the capital. Oh my God! Why did the mountain collapse?" "That's right. The commoners in the capital are also in a state of panic. An army is rushing over here," the little Qilin added. Ning Xuema and the rest were in midair. Naturally, they could see further. Ning Xuema shaded her eyes with her hand and looked far away. She could faintly see an army rushing over. When Ning Xuema and the rest followed Jun Liuye up the mountain, there was an army waiting for them at the foot of the mountain. It was this army that was rushing in their direction. It was even led by a few of Jun Liuye's trusted subordinates. Great God, if they find out that their emperor is gone, how will they see us? What should we do now? Ning Xuemo rubbed her eyebrows. She did not want to be a jinx anymore. Shinjuli pondered for a moment, then slowly came up with a bad idea. "Let's run." "Ah, the great god could run away too." Shinjuli did not wait for her to say anything else. He hugged her and jumped onto Kirin's back. "Let's go." Although there was an 80% chance that they would suffer if they stayed, it was not like the great god to run away. Ning Xuema felt that there was something wrong with the great god's style. But soon, she felt that the great god's style had returned to normal. This was because the great god's escape was incomparably cool. He actually commanded Kirin to fly directly toward the army. Kirin and Little Phoenix were both auspicious beasts. Previously, when they had lost their telekinesis and could only fly, they had attracted the attention of the people of this world. Now they had also recovered their telekinesis. Kirin's entire body was wrapped in a misty blue light, which looked like clouds and mist. Little Phoenix was wrapped in the bright and beautiful flames. When the two beasts flew side by side, there were simply thousands of rays of multicolored light, and propitious vapors were rising. Naturally, this caused the people below to exclaim in surprise. Amidst the exclamations of the people below, Shinjuli and Ning Xuema appeared in the air. Their bodies seemed to be shrouded in auspicious light, as they stood in the air like clouds and mist. Even if they didn't say anything, they still caused the people below to kneel down. Immortal. God. Lord Imperial Preceptor is an immortal. Where is His Majesty? His Majesty has the protection of the immortals. He must be fine. Everyone hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed, all of them extremely excited. When they finished kowtowing and raised their heads to look again, Lord Imperial Preceptor and his wife had already flown far away on the auspicious beasts and disappeared into the horizon. Lord Imperial Preceptor is an immortal. Then the collapse of the mountain just now might not be a bad thing, but a good thing. That's right, this mountain has always blocked the way out of the capital. Now it is a flat and smooth road. But why didn't His Majesty come out? Could it be that His Majesty has also been turned into an immortal by Lord Imperial Preceptor? Everyone's discussion gradually faded away and gradually became inaudible. Ning Xuema glanced at the great god beside her. Sure enough, he was still the great god. He just came out of nowhere and solved the big matter of the emperor's disappearance. Chapter 26:14. In the hearts of the people, even if they couldn't find their emperor, they would only think that their emperor had become an immortal and not be smashed to death. The people here still worshipped the great god and wouldn't curse him behind his back. Now that Ning Xuema and the rest had recovered their psychokinesis, they could fly to outer space to find the space door to return to their own era. However, when they first came to this continent, they came out from underground, so they didn't know where the space door to the Tianxi continent was. They were afraid that they would have to search aimlessly in outer space again. Ning Xuema was about to ask the great god if he had a good way to locate it, when she suddenly saw a snow-white thing rushing up from the snow below. The heavenly stone. To think that it would actually appear here. Kiran didn't recognize this stone, and thought that it was a flying stone. Before the heavenly stone flew in front of him, he slapped it with his claws. What is this? A monstrous wave rushed towards the heavenly stone. Naturally, the heavenly stone wouldn't be hit by the wave. It struck out with a flash of lightning and directly forced the wave back. Kiran was almost hit in the face by his own wave. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. He scratched with his claws and barely managed to retract the wave back. He retracted it too quickly and wet his leg hair. Kiran didn't expect that a stone would dare to challenge him. He glared at the sky and roared, looking like he wanted to fight with the stone. Little Phoenix also didn't want to see his companion at a disadvantage. He opened his eyes wide and fanned out a fire, preparing to refine the stone. The two beasts were used to working together recently. Little Phoenix was responsible for burning the stone. When the stone started to smoke, Kiran would spray ice water at it. Under this alternating cold and hot attack, even if it was a piece of iron, they would still be able to break it into pieces. Now that it was a stone that attacked them, the two beasts were even more excited. Flames and cold water were sprayed towards the heavenly stone. It's just a stone. They didn't believe that they couldn't blow it up under the alternating cold and hot attacks. The heavenly stone had always been worshipped by everyone, and was used to being arrogant. It didn't expect that it would be attacked as soon as it appeared in this world. It was also angry, and its body flashed with colorful lights, repelling the flames and water back. A bird, a beast, and a stone started to fight in the air. Ning Xuema wanted to stop them when they started to fight, but Shen Juli stopped her. Let them play. He pulled her away from the battlefield and watched the fight. Ning Xuema said, Great God, this isn't good, right? While standing beside the great god to watch the fire. Ever since she reunited with the little Qilin and the little Phoenix, she hadn't really seen them fight. Now she wanted to see how much their martial arts had improved. It was a rare opportunity. The wind and water's fire. Ning Xuema didn't forget to comment. Kiran has grown up in these few hundred years. I remember that when I left it, the water it sprayed out was only as thick as a bowl, but now it's as thick as a bucket. It just needs to control its strength. Little Phoenix is also not bad. This child has become more courageous after following Kiran. When it fights, it knows how to cooperate with its companions. Shen Juli also slowly interrupted. It's really not bad. It seems that they are a perfect match. Great God, why don't we pair them up? Ning Xuema was excited. Chapter 26:15. It's better to let nature take its course. Shen Juli tapped the flute on his palm. Great God, the heavenly Tao stone said that you need to help 3 couples. Maybe Kiran and Little Phoenix are one of the couples. They are a good match. Aya, if a Phoenix and a Kiran become husband and wife, what kind of children will they have? A Kiran with Phoenix wings? Or a Phoenix with a Kiran's head? Shen Juli was speechless. Her imagination was extraordinarily rich. Hey, if you don't ask these two to stop, I won't be polite anymore. The heavenly Tao stone suddenly scrolled in Ning Xuema's mind. It was obviously very angry. The scrolling words were so bright that it could blind people's eyes. Ning Shuama crossed her arms and smiled. If you dare to be rude to them, I'll ask the great god to be rude to you. The heavenly Tao stone. The great god was now a person who only cared about the opposite sex. The heavenly Tao stone really didn't dare to provoke her. It could only use other methods. I'm here to tell you a piece of good news and bring you back. There's a time limit. If you miss the time. Therefore, Little Phoenix and Kirin, who were fighting fiercely just now, were stopped by Ning Shuama. Stop fighting. We're on the same side. Little Phoenix. Kirin's eyes widened and blurted out. Master, how did you become on the same side with a broken stone? Little Phoenix also joined in the chaos. Yes, this stone is so abnormal, and it doesn't look good. These two sentences completely offended the heavenly Tao stone. Originally, it wanted to leave with the two people and two beasts, but now it refused to take Kirin and Little Phoenix. No matter how Ning Shuama threatened it, it was useless. It was rare that it couldn't be subdued. Kirin was also angry. It tilted its head and said, If you don't want to take us, then don't. We can go back by ourselves. Master, right? We don't need this broken stone. We can rely on ourselves. Shinjuli looked at it and said calmly, I didn't expect you to have such ambition. Kirin raised its head. Of course. It did not want to be looked down upon. Little Phoenix also put in a good word for it. Master, its ability to recognize the way is very strong. We have been to many places in the past few years, and we have not gotten lost many times. Shinjuli looked at the two of them and tapped the Kirin's scales with his flute. Very good. Then you can go back by yourselves. Kirin. Little Phoenix. Kirin could not take back what he had said. They could only watch helplessly as Shinjuli held Ning Shuama's hand and entered the stone, disappearing without a trace. How unkind. How could he abandon such loyal creatures just like that? Kirin clenched his claws and stared at the rock. It didn't matter. Even if it didn't go in, it could still quietly follow the same route as the stone. It and Little Phoenix could still go back. Its current speed was nothing to scoff at. The heavenly Tao stone lit up and suddenly flew out, shooting straight toward the eastern sky. Little Qilin called out to Little Phoenix, and immediately followed. They also increased their speed to the extreme. Kirin narrowed its eyes proudly when it saw the stone flying in front of them. Suddenly, the stone circled in place, as if it had some malfunction, and fell straight down. Poof! It plunged into the snow and disappeared without a trace. Master and the others will be fine, right? It knew that this stone was not reliable. Chapter 26:16. Little Qilin jumped in fright. It retracted its wings and also plunged down. A moment later, Kirin came out of the snow, its eyes full of doubts. Did you find Master and the others? Little Phoenix, who was waiting on the ground, rushed over. No. I saw it fall down. But I looked for it for a long time, and I couldn't even find its shadow. I didn't even see the passage it went through. Then what should we do? Little Phoenix was anxious. Don't worry, let me think of a way. Maybe the stone is really something. And it's petty and doesn't want us to follow it, so forget it, we'll find our own way back. You follow me, don't run around. Kirin took on the responsibility of a man. Oh. Little Phoenix still trusted it. The bird and the beast began to find their own way. In the crystal hall in the belly of the heavenly stone, Shinjuli and Ning Shuama sat opposite each other. The heavenly stone had recovered well recently, although it was running at a high speed. Ning Shuama and the others didn't feel any turbulence. Shinjuli even set up a chessboard and asked Ning Shuama to play a game. Ning Shuama was a little worried about Kirin and the others. Guru, what if they can't find their way back if we leave them like this? Shinjuli tapped on the chessboard and analyzed for her. Didn't you want to pair them up? Now we're giving them a chance. That stupid Kirin will only grow quickly when it has no one to rely on. Ning Shuama thought so too. Kirin had indeed grown a lot after being separated for so many years. He was also more responsible than before. In her mind, Kirin and Little Phoenix were like children. She didn't want to let them go. She was afraid that they would be taken advantage of or kidnapped. But because of this, these two were too dependent on her, which was not conducive to their growth. Perhaps she should really let go of these two, and let them grow freely. This was the best for them. Now that these two's martial arts were not low, and their ability to travel through time and space was also very strong, they would not really suffer any losses. It would be good to let them roam alone. Ning Xuema was a person who could take things and let them go easily. Since she had thought it through, she didn't take it to heart. Congratulations to the two of you for completing the second mission. A line of joyous words appeared on the crystal pillar within the heavenly Tao stone. Ning Xuema was silent for a moment before she asked, "Is the marriage between Kirin and Little Phoenix the second task?" The second mission was too simple. It didn't seem like the heavenly Tao's style at all. Unexpectedly, the heavenly Tao stone retorted with a bunch of exclamation marks. Then it retorted with the correct answer. No. The second task that this stone is talking about is not them. They are not qualified. I'm talking about Sir God Rongyu. Ning Xuema was surprised. Sir God Rongyu is Rongyu Tianlan. Shenjuli, who was beside him, answered slowly. Rongyu Tianlan? I don't remember fulfilling his wish. At this point, Ning Xuema's big black eyes suddenly widened. She finally reacted. Could it be that Jun Liuye is Rongyu Tianlan? It can't be. Isn't he still alive and well? How did he become Jun Liuye? This was too strange. However, Ning Xuema thought about Jun Liuye's character and bearing carefully. He did resemble Rongyu Tianlan a little, but they didn't look alike. Otherwise, she would have recognized him at a glance. Chapter 26:17. Shenjuli tapped the chessboard with his finger and said, "Play this game with me and I'll tell you." Ning Xuema's curiosity was piqued. She immediately grabbed a chess piece and said, "Come on." The two of them played the game very quickly. Ning Xuema also lost very quickly. After one game, Ning Xuema pushed the chessboard and said, "Guru, tell me, what's going on?" Shenjuli was too lazy to talk. He waved his hand, and a white light flashed. The crystal pillar next to them flashed some images like a movie screen. Under a bright red swaying tree, two people were sitting opposite each other and playing chess. One was wearing a white robe, and the other was wearing a blue robe. Both of them had outstanding looks and an outstanding bearing. Sitting under the tree, they looked particularly eye-catching. Ning Xuema recognized that the white-robed person was Shenjuli, and the blue-robed person was Rongyu Ishinlin. The battle on the chessboard was fierce, and the black and white pieces were fighting happily. The chessboard was like a battlefield, and it was also particular about the arrangement of troops. The chess player was like the marshal controlling the troops. Shenjuli's white pieces already had the advantage, and Rongyu Ishinlin's black pieces were stubbornly resisting. Suddenly, Shenjuli seemed to have sensed something. He waved his sleeve, and a water mirror appeared in front of him. The water mirror showed the scene of Dizun appearing in the cities of various countries. Of course, the Dizun that appeared in the water mirror was Shenjuli's substitute, Wuemo. He sat in a palanquin, and his bearing and bearing were not much different from Shenjuli's. The commoners outside knelt down to welcome him, and the scene was very solemn and grand. Rongyu Ishinlin also took a look at the water mirror. She waved her fan and smiled. "Dizwa, you've done a good job as a substitute. However, there's something I don't understand, and I want to ask you for advice." Shenjuli turned the chess piece in his hand and didn't raise his head. "Speak." "Dizwa, if you want the commoners to live and work in peace, why not unify the continent? There will be fewer wars. Once the mainland is unified, there will be no competition. The regime will decay and decline, and the people will have no way to make a living. Once the corruption reaches the extreme, the people will have no way to survive and will rise up in revolt. At that time, the warlords will be divided and there will be endless chaos. It's better to have three sides." It was rare for Shenjuli to say so much. Rong Yuetian put down a chess piece. He did not agree with Dizun's argument. The two of them continued to play chess while debating, but neither of them managed to convince the other. In the end, Rongyu Tianlan chuckled. "If I am reincarnated as a human, I will definitely unify the mainland and create a peaceful and prosperous world." Shenjuli casually placed a piece to decide the outcome. "Yes, let's wait and see." A gust of wind blew over, blowing away countless red petals that danced around the two of them. It was quite a scene. The scene gradually faded away. Ning Xuema looked at the picture on the crystal pillar and suddenly realized. Could it be that your debate with him made him want to enter the secular world? Is that why he reincarnated as Jun Liuya? That can't be right. Rongyue Tianlan is still perfectly fine on Carefree Island. How did he reincarnate? Shen Juli waved his hand and removed the picture. I have known him for many years and have debated many things. But neither of us cared. Rong Yuetian probably also thought that he didn't care, so he never mentioned it again. It wasn't until later that I was seriously injured while picking herbs. Before I fainted, I contacted him, and he rushed over to save me. Although he succeeded in saving me, he was also seriously injured. Because of this, he went into seclusion for over a dozen years. During his seclusion, something went wrong. Ning Xuema's heart stirred. She was a bit startled. Chapter 26:18. She knew when Shen Juli was referring to the time when she was severely injured while picking herbs. It was the time when the Almighty went to the lava land to pick herbs in order to get rid of the demon in her body. Before the Almighty left, he told her to wait for half a month. In the end, she waited for him for 10 years instead. What happened? He was too heavily injured. When he was meditating to recover, he accidentally went berserk. Although he later adjusted himself, a part of his soul escaped. That's why he came out a few years later than he originally said he would. Ning Xuema was stunned for a moment. The part of his soul that escaped couldn't be Jun Liuya, right? Shen Juli said indifferently. The one that escaped was his second soul, Concealed Arrow, which is also a battle soul. Perhaps the debate between him and me that day caused this soul to become obsessed. So it floated to this cloud underworld continent and reincarnated as Jun Liuya. Since he's a part of Rong Yu's soul, why doesn't he look like her at all? Ning Xuemo asked. The soul has no appearance. Since he was reincarnated, he naturally resembles his parents in this life. It's normal that he doesn't look like his original body. So that's how it is. Since he was reincarnated as a battle soul, his natural mission was to become famous through battle. In his heart, the empire would always be first. That's why Jiyu ended up like this. Ning Xuema finally understood the ins and outs of the matter. She couldn't help but sigh. Fate makes fools of people. No wonder this Jun Liuya inexplicably believed that the great god had a resurrection technique. It turned out that he used to be the great god's old friend. In this life, he came into this life because of the great god. No wonder he was also counted in the great god's account, allowing him to set things right. She seemed to have thought of something. Since he's the reincarnation of Rong Yu's soul, does his death mean that he's returned to his original body? Shen Juli poured 2 cups of tea out of nowhere and handed one to Ning Xuema. He then lazily replied, whether he's returned or not, we'll know when we see him. All right. Ning Xuema didn't want to delve into this question. She was going to see him in person soon anyway. She had another question. Great God, when did you realize that he was Island Master Rongyu? Shen Juli said, not much earlier than you. After entering his dream. Although the Almighty was a highly intelligent person, he didn't really care about mortals. He couldn't be bothered with most things. Unless someone did something that really piqued his interest, he would thoroughly investigate and deduce. Ning Xuema didn't think that she would see Rongyue Tianlan so soon. She had only taken a nap, and as she awoke she discovered that she was standing in a square of Carefree Island that was covered with all sorts of strange flowers and plants. She felt that the stone was trembling, as if it was frightened by something. She curiously looked outside through the crystal, and saw Rong Yuetian carrying a bright chisel and walking around the stone. She looked quite excited and was even muttering. This stone actually emerged from the ground on its own. Looking at it, it looks like it's carrying precious jade. Could it be that it's automatically sending money to me? Would this island master be able to cut out a peerless piece of jade with a chisel? Perhaps it's another jade annulus of He clan. Ning Xuema. The heavenly Dao stone could no longer remain calm. It hurriedly sent out a line of words. Hurry up and leave. Shen Juli wasn't worried at all. He tapped the crystal with his flute and said, You don't usually show your face, so why did you suddenly come out of the ground? The heavenly Tao stone nearly cried. I wasn't careful and drilled over the top. As Rongyue Tianlan's chisel was about to sink in, the heavenly Tao stone recklessly opened an exit. Chapter 26:19. Shenjuli smiled. Then, he held Ning Xuema's hand and walked out slowly. The autumn wind was refreshing, and the flowers bloomed beautifully. Under the worryless tree, Rongyue Shenlin asked the little boy to prepare a table of food. The food was sumptuous, and the fruits and vegetables were very nutritious. There were a few rare treasures. Ning Xuema ate to her heart's content. Shenjuli saw that she ate to her heart's content, so he was satisfied too. Rongyue Shenlin had already put away his chisel. At this moment he was waving a fan. Are the two of you satisfied with the food? Can you satisfy my curiosity? The two of you obviously returned to Buddha Lotus Mountain to see your disciples. How did you come out of the stone in the blink of an eye? That stone, is it a female? The heavenly law stone, which had been too lazy to bother with idle people, couldn't help but strike Rongyue Shenlin with a bolt of lightning. Rongyue Shenlin was surprised. He waved his fan, and the bolt of lightning struck his fan. With a swoosh, a hole appeared on the surface of the fan. Rongyue Shenlin's fan looked ordinary, but it was actually a treasured fan. Not to mention the other flashy functions, its sturdiness alone could defeat all shields. No divine weapon would be able to leave a single mark on it. Now it was burned by a bolt of lightning from a stone. Rongyue Shenlin was so distressed that he wanted to kick the stone to the sky. Where did this stone spirit come from? Rongyue Shenlin looked at the heavenly law stone unkindly. Tell this ignorant person that I am the heavenly law stone, the one in charge of the heavenly law, not some stone spirit. Stone spirit is not even fit to wipe my shell. The heavenly law stone kept saying to Ning Xuema and Shenjuli in their hearts. Ning Xuema smiled and said, Didn't you say that your identity shouldn't be revealed in this world? Why are you letting me say it now? The heavenly law stone was speechless. It was depressed. Suddenly, it drilled into the ground and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Rongyue Tianlan looked at her own piece of land that didn't even have an ant's nest left behind. She then looked at Shenjuli and Luo Binghe. Both of you, can you tell Xiao Xian what's going on? Where did the stone go? He could see through all invisibility spells, so the stone should not be invisible. Shenjuli didn't care. Don't worry about it. It's going to conserve energy. If Shenjuli didn't want to talk about it, even a diamond drill wouldn't be able to pry it open. Rongyue Tian had no choice but to give up. The three of them drank for a while. Ning Xuema looked at Rongyue Tianlan's blue robe that was faintly inlaid with gold. She smiled and said, Island Master Rongyue, you look quite shiny today. Shenjuli turned the wine glass and looked at Rongyue Tianlan up and down. He said slowly, Rongyue, congratulations on successfully passing the tribulation and becoming a mighty immortal. Rongyue Tianlan rolled up her sleeves. Thank you, thank you. Ning Xuema thought of the extremely abnormal thunderbolts and lightning that she saw when the Wangchuan Peak collapsed in Jiyue Nation. Her heart skipped a beat. Could that lightning be the thunder of his tribulation? The commotion caused by the battle was truly huge. She didn't know if his original body was struck by lightning. Ning Xuema looked at Rongyue Tianlan's expression and asked the question in her heart. Were you struck by lightning during your tribulation? Rongyue Tianlan pondered for a while. She rubbed the space between her eyebrows with her fan. This matter is a little strange. I was supposed to be struck by golden lightning when I passed the tribulation to become a mighty immortal. However, maybe because I wasn't on the mainland, I was only struck by lightning in my dream. What's more strange is that in my dream, I was still fighting with my strength to attract the lightning. It was as if I was seeking death. Chapter 26:20. Luckily, it was just a dream. When I woke up, I realized that I was still on the bed, but there was a mark on my body indicating that I had successfully passed the tribulation. Ever since he was born, he had gone through all kinds of tribulations. As his level increased, the tribulations he went through became more and more intense. The last time he went through the tribulation, He was almost turned into a piece of charcoal by the divine thunder. Even his parents couldn't recognize him. He had always been lazy and didn't have any big ambitions. He just liked to travel and play. He felt that his ability as a monarch god was enough for him to do these things freely. Therefore, after he became a monarch god, he stopped cultivating. Every day he just made tea and incense. He was very carefree. However, he didn't expect that when a person was lucky, even the gods couldn't stop him. He actually succeeded in passing the tribulation in his dream. After he woke up, not a single strand of his hair was out of place. This made him very gratified. The only thing that made him unhappy was that some irrelevant images would occasionally appear in his mind. Although they were fragmented, his usually peaceful mind was affected. What made him even more confused was that when he woke up, he realized that his face was full of tears. He felt an inexplicable sense of loss in his heart. It was as if he had lost something very important and couldn't find it back. Obviously, he succeeded in passing the tribulation in his dream and didn't suffer much. It should have been something worth celebrating, but his mood was very low. Thus, he wandered around the courtyard to get rid of his bad mood. In the end, he saw the heavenly path stone drill out from the ground like a cannonball. Rong Yuishenlin and Shinjuli were good friends, so Rong Yuishenlin had nothing to fear from Shinjuli. He told Dizwa about what had happened after he had passed the heavenly tribulation. In the end he said, "Dizwa, don't you think that passing the heavenly tribulation and becoming a mighty immortal is something worth celebrating? Why am I always in a bad mood?" Shinjuli pondered for a moment and replied with 3 words. "Are you homesick?" Rong Yuishenlin was speechless. Shinjuli added, "If you miss home, then go back. In any case, you have become a supreme immortal. Now that you go back, you can be considered returning home in glory." Rong Yuishenlin sneered and opened his fan. "I'm not interested in returning home in glory. My family might not be looking forward to me returning home in glory." Shinjuli slowly took a sip of wine and said, "That's not necessarily true. Your little fiancé might be looking forward to your return in glory." Rong Yuetian choked on her tea. A moment later, he rubbed his forehead and helplessly said, "Dizwa, you are making fun of Xiao Xian again. That girl's milk is still there. So do you know what it means to return home in glory?" Shinjuli looked at him thoughtfully and didn't say anything. Rong Yuetianlan was a little flustered by his scrutiny. She tidied her clothes and asked, "Why is Dizwa looking at me like that?" Shinjuli leisurely sized him up from head to toe, and then from toe to head. Only then did he slowly open his mouth and say, "From what I see, there should be a red Luan star movement in you recently. The peach blossoms should be blooming soon." Rong Yuetianlan waved her fan and smiled elegantly. "I won't hide it from Dizwa. This little deity's luck with women has always been flourishing. Every time I go out, I always attract 1 or 2. Shinjuli said, "The peach blossoms this time are different. Your fated one should be arriving." Rong Yuetianlan was startled. He knew that Shinjuli was proficient in algebra, and nothing that he said wasn't true. Rong Yuetianlan immediately became interested. "Then may I ask Dizwa, who is this little deity's fated one?" As he asked this, a pale pink figure flashed across his mind. His heart inexplicably twisted. Chapter 26-21. He originally wanted to make a joke about the ancestor, but after that beautiful figure flashed by, he couldn't make that joke anymore. Shinjuli kept him in suspense at this time. Heaven's secret can't be revealed. Rong Yuetianlan sat in place for a moment and suddenly sighed. "Maybe I should really go back." Shinjuli raised his eyebrows and looked at him. Rong Yuetianlan continued, "It's better for me to go back and think of a way to cancel that marriage." Shinjuli smiled and didn't say anything. Ning Xuema was curious. Although she had known Rong Yuetianlan for a long time, she knew very little about his background. She only knew that he didn't belong to any sect and didn't participate in any affairs of this continent. He was very free and easy. She thought he was like the Almighty, born without parents on this continent. It turned out that he also had a family, and even a fiancé. She didn't know what his family was. She hadn't heard of any powerful family on this continent with the surname Rongyue. Island Master Rongyue actually has a family. I wonder which country it is in. Listening to your conversation, you have a fiancé? Ning Xuemo asked. Rongyue Tianlan sighed and said, I originally didn't belong to this continent. I escaped from my marriage. Forget it, your husband knows this. Let him tell you. He seemed somewhat dispirited and helpless. Ning Xuemo looked at the Almighty beside her, and then looked at him again. She said decisively, The Almighty's words are too concise and comprehensive. I want to hear more details. It's better if you say it yourself. Who knows, I might be able to give you some ideas. She didn't want to listen to stories from Shen Juli's mouth. The Almighty only gave a brief summary of the story. 2 or 3 sentences could summarize a person's life. What kind of story with ups and downs was like plain water in his mouth? Her words made Rongyue Tianlan very happy. He waved his fan and laughed. Dizwa, why don't I say it myself? Shen Juli glanced at him lightly and said indifferently, His story is actually quite boring. You don't have to listen to his embellishment. I'll tell you. He was indeed not from this continent. He came from the Sanskrit continent, and was the 8th son of the Eastern Sky Great Emperor, who was in charge of the world's flowers and plants. The Eastern Sky's big emperor system is hereditary. The son inherits the father's business. The 3 older brothers above all have great talent and bold vision, fighting for the position of crown prince until their heads are broken and blood is shed. This island master Rongyu is relatively aloof from worldly affairs, and did not participate in this inheritance war. However, he has many crafty ideas, wide connections and strong martial arts. He is the object of the 3 older brothers' struggle to win over, causing this island master Rongyu to be unable to bear it any longer. He has always been traveling outside, not participating in political disputes. More than 3,000 years ago, the Eastern Sky King, I don't know who he believed, but he said that the daughter of the Southern Sky King's family was not only beautiful, but also had the ability to bring prosperity to her husband's family. As a result, the Eastern Sky King had the idea of a marriage alliance with the Southern Sky King. It just so happened that Island Master Rongyu's 3 elder brothers had already married their first wives, so the important task of forming a marriage alliance fell on Island Master Rongyu. Island Master Rongyu didn't want to be a chess piece and refused to agree. Being urged by the Eastern Sky King in all kinds of ways, he had no choice but to flee without a trace. With this escape, he directly escaped from the Fanning continent and came here. It was rare for the great god to say so much in one breath, so Ning Xuemo wasn't stingy in giving him a thumbs up. She then turned her head to look at Rongyue Tianlan. Island Master Rongyu, I feel that you being used as a chess piece for a marriage alliance is quite tragic and not in line with your style. However, since the rumor has it that the daughter of the Southern Sky King is beautiful, and also has the life of bringing prosperity to her husband, then it definitely can't be bad. Chapter 26-22. Island Lord Rongyue. I think it's sad that you were used as a chess piece in a marriage alliance. It doesn't suit your style. But since it's rumored that the daughter of the Southern Heaven Great Emperor is beautiful, and has the fortune of bringing good fortune to her husband, she can't be bad. Maybe she's the most beautiful woman in the world. Why don't you meet her first? Maybe she's really the right person for you. Rongyue Tianlan sneered. Beautiful? Her elder sisters may be beautiful, but is she ugly? Not necessarily. She was only half a year old when the marriage was proposed. She was still a little girl whose teeth hadn't grown out yet. Ning Xuema. That's too perverted. They actually allowed you to molest a baby. Rongyue Tianlan. His lips twitched. You can't say that. In fact, it was only an engagement at that time. If they wanted to get married, they had to wait until she was an adult. Well, you said you needed to break off the engagement. Did you run away after the engagement? Rongyue Tianlan shook his head. No, I ran away first. My family used my birth characters to propose marriage, and the other party agreed. Shenjuli slowly added. According to the rules of the Fanning continent, once a man and a woman are engaged, they will automatically be engraved on a specific totem pole. Unless both parties voluntarily break off the engagement, they can't remarry. If they break the contract, they will be severely punished by the totem pole. Rongyue Tianlan was surprised. Dizhua, how do you know so much about the Fanning continent? He didn't tell Shenjuli about these things. Shenjuli took a sip of tea. A few years ago, I accidentally went there and saw your family. Rongyue Tianlan almost dropped the fan in his hand. Dizhua, how come I've never heard you mention it? Shenjuli didn't have any expression on his face. Because I'm not a gossipy person. Rongyue Tianlan. Shenjuli leisurely added. Since you're curious, I'll tell you more. Your family has never given up looking for you for so many years. The little princess engraved on the pillar of marriage with you is also looking for you while gnashing her teeth. Rongyue Tian was puzzled. She's just a little girl who hasn't even shed her hair. Why is she looking for me? Shenjuli placed the flute in his hand on Rongyue Tianlan's shoulder and said earnestly, she also wants to break off the engagement with you. Also, she is now 3,000 years old. In the Fanning continent, this age is already considered an old lady. Now that you have escaped, you are free and unfettered, but she has no choice but to live in the name of your fiancé. When you escaped back then, in order to make the marriage proposal go smoothly, your imperial father said that you were only going out to study and would return in 300 to 500 years. Later on, he said that you were in a critical stage of cultivation and dragged it on for another few hundred years. Just like that, the princess has turned into an old maid. Ning Xuema was indignant on behalf of the girl. Rongyue, you are too unkind. You forcefully dragged a cute little girl into an old maid. This hatred isn't small. You can't blame her for gnashing her teeth and looking for you. Shenjuli flicked his sleeves and added fuel to the fire. It's fine if it's just dragging her into an old maid. The most terrible thing is the rumors about her. What rumors? Ning Xuemo echoed him. Because he ran away from the marriage and didn't come back for thousands of years. The people of the Fanning continent spread rumors that this girl must have a hidden disease that can't be seen. She actually made her fiancé run away from the marriage and not come back for so many years. Chapter 26-23. Ning Xuema clenched her fists. This rumor is really terrible. It must be very difficult for a girl to live with such a reputation. She probably wants to chop her fiancé into pieces. Rongyue Ishinlin was speechless. He finally sighed. Forget it. I'll go back and solve this matter in a few days. Actually, 3,000 years old is not considered an old lady. As long as this engagement is cancelled, she can still find a good family to marry. Shenjuli asked him. You haven't even seen the girl, and you've already made up your mind to cancel the engagement? Rongyue Ishinlin was stunned. The figure of the girl in pink flashed across his mind again. He couldn't see the face of the girl in pink clearly, but he inexplicably agreed with her. He felt that if his red Luan star really moved, it should be because of the girl in pink. Then there was no need to delay the other girl. After all, the girl was also innocent. When he went back, he would explain this matter while canceling the engagement. He would tell the world that it was his fault and not the girl's fault. If possible, he could also be a matchmaker for the girl. He had many friends in the Fanning continent, and there was no lack of outstanding young talents among them. Since you don't mean to, then there's no need to meet. Rongyue Ishinlin's answer was straightforward. Even though he felt sorry for the girl, he could only cut the Gordian knot. The banquet didn't end until the moon rose in the east. Early the next morning, Rongyue Ishinlin came to Shenjuli with 2 dark circles under his eyes. He entrusted all the flowers, birds, insects, and fish on his island to Shenjuli, as if he was an orphan. He was afraid that Shenjuli didn't understand these things, so he made a detailed list of all kinds of taboos. Ning Xuema looked at the lines of words and felt a little dizzy. Island Lord, are you going to be gone for a long time? Rongyue Ishinlin sighed. The Fanning continent is a little far from here. It will take a few months on the road. Besides, canceling the engagement will implicate some people. I have to deal with it properly before I can come back. When are you leaving? Shenjuli didn't look at the list. Now. Rongyue Ishinlin bowed to Shenjuli, turned around and strode out. It turns out that he's also an impatient person. Ning Xuema couldn't help but laugh. He actually came back just like that. He's probably afraid of wasting a day of the girl's youth, Shenjuli replied. He's been delayed for more than 3,000 years, so he's not in a hurry. However almighty, his battle soul should have returned, right? He had already succeeded in transcending the tribulation. But from the looks of it, he doesn't seem to remember Jiyu. Ning Xuema thought of the pitiful girl and felt a little sad. Once the soul returns, it will not have any memories. It's not strange that he doesn't remember, Shenjuli explained to her. Then their story will truly come to an end there. What a pity. I always thought that they would have a happy ending. Ning Xuema sighed. Shenjuli held her in his arms and said, 9 out of 10 things in the world don't go your way. How can there be so many beautiful flowers and full moons? Sigh. I can only blame Jun Liuye for being too greedy for power and being too jealous. If he had quietly told Jiyu when he was supervising the execution of Jiyu Nation's monarch and his wife, she wouldn't have gone crazy. Maybe they could have been loving each other for the rest of their lives. Even if it was because of jealousy that he didn't say anything in advance when he wanted to punish her, he should have exposed Jiyu's conspiracy when she came to find him after she woke up. Chapter 26-24. Since he had seen through Jiyu's plot, he should have exposed it on the spot, or told Jiyu the truth, that her parents were not dead. That way, even if Jiyu did not believe it, she would still want to verify it. Then, there would not have been any later. However, after he saw through it, he immediately came up with another plan. He wanted to use Jiyu's revenge to lure out the king of Xingyu country and eliminate him. For this, he did not hesitate to use the trick of injuring himself. He did succeed, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. He thought this was a good plan that could let Jiyu vent her anger and also get rid of his opponent. However, he did not know that after Jiyu killed him, she became disheartened and activated the poison in her body, making things completely irreversible. Shenjuli said, "The reincarnation of a warrior's soul is his first instinct. It was originally an accident that he fell in love with Princess Jiyu. Then, great God, did Princess Jiyu's soul really dissipate?" Ning Xuema was still confused about this. Shenjuli smiled and said slowly, "Actually, Princess Jiyu's origin is similar to Jun Liuye's." Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. She reacted quickly and immediately said, "Could it be that she is also the reincarnation of a goddess?" Shenjuli said, "Smart girl. However, it might not be a soul dissipation." He peeled a walnut and put it in her hand as a reward. Ning Xuema's curiosity was piqued. She grabbed his hand and asked, "Which goddess? Do we know each other? If it's not a soul dissipation, then what is it?" Shenjuli curved his lips. "Maybe it's an obsession, or maybe it's an out-of-body dream." He then added, "I heard that Rong Yu's fiancé is called Ji Shenyu." Pada. The teacup in Ning Xuema's hand fell to the ground. It seemed to be a little lively. The mountain was not high, but it was famous because of immortals. The water was not deep, but it was famous because of dragons. Although the immortal Cloud Mountain had the word immortal in its name, it was actually a barren place. Throughout history, only demons and devils resided there. Occasionally, an immortal would appear, and they were all here to vanquish demons and devils. In the depths of the immortal Cloud Mountain, there was a coiling dragon stream. Within the coiling dragon stream, there was indeed a flood dragon that was said to have cultivated for 1,000 years. This flood dragon was a passing flood dragon. It came here a year ago, probably because the scenery here was to its liking. It actually stayed here and didn't leave. This flood dragon was extremely ferocious. It had the ability to spit out clouds and mist. Whatever it saw, it would swallow. Most of the creatures in the mountain had been swallowed by it. Even the various demons and devils had been swallowed by it. Not only that, but it also often went down the mountain to eat the passers-by. After the demonic wind passed, an entire village would become its food. This immortal Cloud Mountain was the South Heaven Thearch's territory. With such a ferocious creature appearing in his territory, the South Heaven Thearch naturally had a headache. He sent many capable soldiers and experts to get rid of it. However, this flood dragon was too powerful and too cunning. These people were either not its match and were swallowed by it, or it escaped in advance after receiving the news. After searching the entire mountain, they couldn't find it. In this way, this flood dragon became a huge problem for the South Heaven Arch. However, he didn't have a way to get rid of it. He could only order all the villagers within a dozen miles of the Immortal Cloud Mountain to be moved out. The Immortal Cloud Mountain was also strictly prohibited from entering and exiting. The South Heaven Thearch's side was proficient in fire techniques. However, this flood dragon was of the water element. Moreover, this water element was not small. Water could suppress fire. So the people on the South Heaven Thearch's side suffered a lot from this flood dragon. The South Heaven Arch had 4 daughters. The eldest and second daughters were all married, and they married very well. Chapter 26-25. The eldest daughter was married to a general of the South Sky Emperor, with outstanding military achievements. The second daughter was married to the eldest prince of the North Sky Emperor, and it was said that their martial arts were also very good. Only the third daughter, Ji Xinyue, was unmarried and became a joke. When the Immortal Cloud Mountain was troubled by the flood dragon, the 2 sons-in-law naturally volunteered to lead troops to capture the flood dragon, intending to get rid of the evil for the people. However, because of various reasons, they returned in low spirits. Not only did they fail to get rid of the evil dragon, but they also lost many of their proud subordinates. These 2 were well-known figures of the continent, but they also returned in failure, which made the dragon even more famous. Many famous immortals came one after another, wanting to get rid of the evil dragon. However, most of them basically came but did not leave. Their lives were buried in the dragon's mouth. After a long time, this place became the forbidden area of the entire Fanning continent. This flood dragon was not only cruel, but also very greedy. After it took over the entire Immortal Cloud Mountain, it did not give up. In the past month, it began to expand its territory, frequently attacking cities and towns dozens of miles away from Mount Lee. 10 days ago, it caused the biggest tragedy. It devoured and killed the people of a city, and more than 100,000 people died tragically under the dragon's claws and mouth. According to the official's report, the entire small city was razed to the ground, and the ground was full of disemboweled corpses. The originally bustling small city became hell on earth overnight. This tragedy shocked the entire Fanning continent, and also made the South Sky Emperor very angry. That day, he flew into a rage in the imperial court, and even his most proud son-in-law, Le Zhongxiao, was scolded by him. Le Zhongxiao was very angry, and complained a little when he returned home, which made his wife, Ji Xinluo, very unhappy. The next day, she returned to her maternal home, and her second sister, Ji Shenmeng, was also there. The 2 sisters naturally talked about the flood dragon, and the more they talked, the angrier they became. They could not help but praise their son-in-law, saying that they had done their best, and that the dragon was too abnormal. They also had a lot to say about their father. This made the Empress very unhappy, and she could not help but scold them a little. This made the 2 sisters immediately unhappy. They were born of the South Sky Emperor's concubine, and the children born of concubines were often inferior and arrogant, so their temperament was a little harsh. At this moment, when they heard the Empress's reprimand, they felt very indignant. Ji Xinluo put on a fake smile and said, "You're right, Imperial Mother. We shouldn't complain about Imperial Father." However, we were too worried about the flood dragon. As the saying goes, capable people do more work, and capable people are easily blamed. Just like my husband, he was clearly overwrought with this matter, but he was still reprimanded by Imperial Father. Of course, as the younger generation, even if we are reprimanded, we can't say anything else. From the looks of it, little sister is still the best. Although she has a famous husband, that husband ran away from the marriage. Now there's no need for anyone to complain. Ji Shenmeng also agreed, "That's right. It seems like little sister is more fortunate. Although it's a bit embarrassing that her husband ran away, she won't have to be scolded this time." The empress was rendered speechless by the two of them. The little sister they were talking about was Ji Xinyu, born of the empress. It was said that when she was born, there were 16 phoenixes flying in the sky. She was seen as an auspicious sign by the South Sky clan, and the South Sky Emperor doted on her a lot. When she was still an infant, he arranged a good marriage for her. In the eyes of the two sisters, their little sister was simply the embodiment of all the love in the world, making others jealous. Chapter 26:26. It wasn't until the 8th prince of the East Sky Emperor, who was rumored to be the most handsome, stylish, and capable man in the Fanning continent, Rongyu Tianlan, ran away from the marriage that the halo that the heavens had placed on Ji Xinyue's head truly disappeared. And as time passed, this little princess gradually became a laughingstock. No matter where this little princess went, she would receive people's pity or gloating gazes, as well as all kinds of unbearable rumors. Of course, more than half of these rumors were secretly spread by Ji Xinluo and Ji Xinyue. What Ji Xinyue was unbearably rude, what Ji Xinyue had a hidden illness, what Ji Xinyue was destined to bring bad luck to her husband and children. This rumor spread more and more widely, directly turning Ji Xinyue, a proud daughter of heaven, into a joke of the Nantian clan. Gradually, even the Nantian emperor didn't like this third daughter very much, and even became cold to Ji Xinyue's birth mother, the empress. He treated Ji Xinluo and Ji Xinming better and better, and doted on their mother, consort He. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't find the empress' fault, and that the empress's family was quite powerful in the Fanning continent, the empress's position would have been snatched away by consort He. The empress and her daughter had a delicate position in the palace, and the empress could only tolerate these two princesses who weren't her own. This time, if it wasn't for Ji Xinluo and Ji Xinming's words, the empress wouldn't have interfered. Now that she was refuted by the two women's strange words, she actually had nothing to say, and was so angry that her face faintly turned green. She could only rejoice in her heart that her daughter wasn't in the palace, and didn't have to listen to the two sisters' nonsense. The daughters of the Nantian clan were only considered adults when they were 1,000 years old. When Ji Xinyue was 500 years old, she gradually became a laughingstock because of Rongyu Tianlan running away from the marriage, and was often laughed at by her sisters in the palace. She was probably depressed in her heart, and often fell sick, becoming a sickly person. Later, the priest of the Nantian clan suddenly received a heavenly decree, saying that Ji Xinyue, the little princess, had to leave the palace and become a disciple to grow up, and could not return before she was 1,000 years old. The Nantian emperor listened to the priest, and sent Ji Xinyue out of the palace, to become a disciple of a rather famous sect in the Fanning continent. She was gone for 500 years. When she returned 500 years later, she had already grown into a slender and elegant young lady. She was used to being outside, so she was not used to returning to the palace. Therefore, although she could come back, she was not willing to. She could not return home, even once in 100 years. When they came back, they would stay for a couple of days before leaving, just like visiting relatives. Just as the empress was rejoicing, the little palace maid outside ran in and reported, "Congratulations, Your Majesty, the third princess is back." The empress's eyes lit up. She hadn't seen her daughter for nearly 100 years. Naturally, she missed her very much. She couldn't help but stand up and was about to say something. Ji Xinluo chuckled from the side. "Oh, third sister, you really came at a time like this." Ji Xinming also smiled and said, "Third sister probably heard about the flood dragon, and came back to share Imperial Father's worries. What a pity. What was the use of a little girl like her coming back? If she could be more charming and attract her fiancé, maybe she could be of some use." "Second sister, don't joke. That divine Lord Rongyu has been missing for more than 3,000 years. If he wanted to come back, he would have come back long ago. Maybe he has already married, and had children outside and forgotten about our little sister's marriage. It's just a pity that our little sister is still waiting for him." Chapter 26:27. That's true, poor third sister. The two of them talked back and forth without restraint. The Empress was so angry that her face turned green. She was about to reprimand them when a clear voice came from outside. Sisters, do you feel uncomfortable if you don't gossip about old topics? Do you feel suffocated? Following the voice, a young girl in a light red dress appeared. Her long hair was like clouds and her face was like jade. Her eyes were as clear as autumn water, and her lips were like cherry blossoms. She was so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off her. Ji Shenluo and Ji Shenmeng were already rare beauties, but when they stood next to this young girl, they automatically became background decorations. What was even rarer was her temperament. There was purity in her carelessness, and sharpness in her laziness. These were clearly very contradictory qualities, but they were organically combined on her, and didn't give off any sense of contradiction. At this moment, her pretty face was slightly gloomy, and her eyes fell on Ji Shenluo and Ji Shenmeng, giving off a kind of domineering aura. It made Ji Shenluo and Ji Shenmeng's hearts turn cold. This young girl was Ji Shenyue, the third princess of South Heaven Emperor. Her words were not polite at all, and she didn't give the two sisters any face. Ji Shenluo and Ji Shenmeng were stunned for a moment, and their pretty faces turned red. Third sister, how can you talk to your sister like that? We are worried for your good. That's why we are worried about you. Yes, we also feel sorry for you. Ji Shenluo and Ji Shenmeng began to echo each other again. Ji Shenyue frowned slightly and said straightforwardly, "Thank you, but you don't need to worry and feel sorry for me. You two just need to take care of your husband's family. You don't need to worry about these things. To be honest, I am the Heaven's Mandate Princess, and you are the Earth's Mandate Princess. You have no right to interfere in my matters." The Heaven's Mandate Princess was the princess of the main line, while the Earth's Mandate Princess was born from a concubine. Even if Ji Shenyue wasn't liked by her father now, but her status was there. Once she established her power, no one else could say anything. Ji Shenluo and her sister were rendered speechless by her words. Their faces turned green and white for a moment before they spat out, "You don't know what's good for you." Then they hurriedly left. Because of their anger, they even forgot to bid farewell to the Empress. Ji Shenyu said coldly, "Little sister, I heard that the two of you have always been reasonable. How could you forget the rules of conduct at this time? Or are the two of you looking down on the Empress?" Ji Shenluo and the other girl felt as if they had been slapped in the face, but they couldn't refute the other party's words. After staying in place for a while, she finally reluctantly bowed and bid farewell to the Empress. Only then did she glare at Ji Shenyu and turn around to leave. Before he left, he muttered, "What are you so proud of? She's just an abandoned woman who no one wants." Ji Shenyu didn't take it to heart. She had heard such words so often that she was already numb to them. When the Empress saw that her daughter's expression was normal, she was relieved. She was still somewhat gratified. When Ji Shenyu was young, she was doted on by everyone. She was lively, intelligent, and had a cheerful personality. But as more and more unpleasant rumors about her spread inside and outside the palace, she became more and more aware of human affairs. Her personality also became more and more sensitive and suspicious. Gradually, she even lost her self-confidence. She became more and more silent, more and more eccentric, and more disliked by her father. It wasn't until she left the palace that she came back as a different person after 500 years of learning outside. Finally, she became lively and cheerful again. Chapter 26-28. But perhaps because of the environment, her personality had a lot of characteristics, such as sharp words, confidence, and laziness. Even if she didn't speak, she was like a shining object, unknowingly attracting the attention of many people. Even the South Sky Emperor's attitude towards her was much better. Those gossips had once hurt her deeply, but now she could laugh at those gossips and no longer take them to heart. After the mother and son talked for a while, Ji Shenyu casually asked, "This son heard that an evil dragon appeared in the immortal Cloud Mountain, and made father very worried?" The Empress' expression darkened, but she didn't hide it from her daughter. She told her about how the evil dragon had wreaked havoc in the past year, and finally sighed, I don't know where this evil dragon came from, but it's actually so powerful. Your father has been worried day and night because of this. However, in the vast Sanskrit continent, no one was able to deal with it. Even your master went out a few days ago, but he didn't succeed. He even got seriously injured. I wonder if he's feeling better now? Ji Xinyu nodded slightly and said, Master is much better. This son only knew about this from Master. Otherwise, she wouldn't have hurried back. Ji Xinyu's master was the sect master of the Purple Cloud sect, a famous cultivation sect. The sect master's martial arts were extremely high, and he was one of the top experts in the Sanyin continent. Even he had to return in defeat, so who could subdue that evil dragon? No wonder the South Sky Emperor had a big headache. As the mother and son were talking, the South Sky Emperor probably heard the news of the three women's return and rushed over. The father and daughter hadn't seen each other for 100 years. After greeting him, Ji Xinyu's expression was indifferent, and she had nothing to say. The South Sky Emperor looked at his daughter with a slightly complicated expression. This daughter used to be his pride, but now she was the laughingstock of the entire South Sky clan. And because of this, he couldn't help but take out his anger on his daughter, and became colder and colder to her, causing the relationship between father and daughter to drift apart. In fact, how could that matter be blamed on his daughter? His daughter was the one who was truly innocent. Not only did she have to endure the rumors outside, but she also had to be treated coldly at home. No wonder she didn't want to come back even after finishing her apprenticeship. By the time the South Heaven Emperor realized his mistake and wanted to get closer to his daughter, it was already too late. Just now, he had heard his daughter talking and laughing with the Empress outside the palace gates. But after he came in, his daughter's little face seemed to be wearing a mask. Her expression was indifferent and cold, and her words to him were polite and distant. This made him feel a little uncomfortable. He tried his best to talk to her kindly, asking her about her recent learning and what happened in the Xian sect. He asked a lot of questions, but his daughter only gave brief answers. After exchanging 7 or 8 sentences, the father and daughter pair had nothing more to say. The atmosphere was a little stiff and cold. In order to smooth things over, the Empress changed the topic. Ji Xinyu pondered for a moment, then decided to change the topic to the evil flood dragon. Father, what kind of abilities does that evil flood dragon have? How many generals in the imperial court had ever fought against it? What are its characteristics? This was the most annoying thing for the South Heaven Emperor. The Empress didn't even dare to mention it in front of him, for fear of upsetting him even more. She didn't expect her daughter to ask about it so openly. Her heart sank, and she hurriedly glanced at her daughter, signaling her not to ask about it. Ji Xinyu acted as if she didn't see it, and continued to ask questions about the evil flood dragon, such as its attributes and characteristics. Chapter 26-29. South Sky Emperor's expression turned ugly as he said impatiently, "Why is a girl like you asking about other people's business? You should learn more about needlework from your sisters." Girls in this world also knew immortal spells, but most of them were related to needlework. For example, they could make the most beautiful brocade by forging heavenly shuttles, or they could make lifelike embroidery by cultivating divine needles, or they could make the most delicious dishes by cultivating culinary skills. Ji Xinyu's eldest sister and second sister were good at embroidery and cooking respectively. Eldest brother-in-law's brocade robe was personally sewn by eldest sister, and every time he wore it, he would attract a lot of envy. Second brother-in-law especially liked to eat his wife's stir-fried dishes, and he would occasionally call his friends back to let his wife cook. Naturally, his friends would praise his wife. They all praised South Sky Emperor for teaching his daughter well, adding a lot of color to South Sky Emperor's face. However, Ji Xinyu was different. She didn't like to dress up. She liked to play with swords and spears. When she was young, she never lost a fight with boys, and even became the king of the children. However, she didn't know needlework or the 4 arts that represented a woman's elegance. She was clearly a great beauty, but she liked to play with men's things. This was also seen as one of the reasons why Divine Lord Rongyu ran away from her marriage. The outside world even said that she was a tomboy and wouldn't be liked by any man. South Sky Emperor thought of those rumors and became even more unhappy, so he scolded her. Ji Xinyu frowned slightly. Like before, when she heard her father scolding her like this, she would tactfully keep quiet and stop asking questions. This time she didn't give up. "Father, how is this other people's business? This evil dragon is a disaster. We must find a way to get rid of it. I am asking because I want to share your worries." South Sky Emperor didn't expect her to refute like this, and became even more impatient. "The entire imperial court is helpless about this matter. How can a weak woman like you share my worries? Don't cause trouble. I really want to share your worries. If you really want to share your worries, then call your fiancé here. He was once the #1 expert of the continent. Maybe he has a way." South Sky Emperor blurted out again. "Ji Xinyu." She pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. The South Heaven's Arch also realized his slip of the tongue and became even more irritated. He didn't know what to do. "Is elder sister back?" A delicate female voice came from the entrance of the hall, and a girl in pink came bouncing in. This girl looked like a human child, about 11 or 12 years old. She was wearing a delicate pink dress. Her eyes were big, and her mouth was small. When she jumped in, it was as if she brought along sunlight. She was a little reckless. When she entered the door, she tripped over the threshold and almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, the South Sky Emperor's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. He caught the girl in time and held her in his arms. He couldn't help but scold her. "Tianyu, don't be so careless." Although he was reprimanding her, the expression on his face was very loving. He even checked her little feet with concern. His concern was obvious. This girl was the youngest daughter of the South Heaven Emperor, Ji Tianyue. She was 500 years old this year, and was not yet an adult. She was at the age when she was still young and naive. She looked like an adorable pink dumpling. Every time the South Heaven Emperor saw her, all of his troubles would be temporarily put aside. Ji Xinyu watched from the side and was momentarily dazed. Chapter 2630. Once upon a time, she was also doted on by her father, but Ji Tianyue slipped out of South Sky Emperor's arms and threw herself at Ji Xinyu. Third sister. Ji Xinyu could only catch her. The little girl's round eyes looked at her with joy. "Third sister, you haven't been back for a long time. Tianyue has been missing you. Can you take me to play for a few more days?" Every time she saw this little girl, Ji Xinyu felt as if she was looking at herself when she was young. She was carefree and happy, innocent and pure like a transparent crystal. Perhaps only a child who had never experienced any hardships would be able to maintain such innocence. So she took extra care of this little sister, and would take her to play for a few days every time she came back. Therefore she agreed readily this time. "Okay." Ji Tianyue's eyes lit up. "Third sister, then can you teach me another set of knife skills?" Before Ji Xinyu could speak, South Sky Emperor's face had already sunk. It's not right for a girl to always play with knives and sticks. "Tianyue, go learn needlework from your eldest sister and second sister. Don't learn these irrelevant things." Ji Tianyue pouted. "But third sister promised me last time to teach me a set of martial arts." Third sister said that girls can only protect themselves with their own skills. There's no need to beg anyone. As princesses, you have people protecting you. Why do you need to learn those men's skills? "Xinyu, you're already crippled. Don't lead your little sister astray." South Sky Emperor was even more unhappy. Ji Xinyu's expression changed slightly. She let go of Ji Tianyue, stood up, and said indifferently, "Father, mother, I still have matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave." She bowed to her parents, turned around and strode away. "Empress!" "Xinyu!" Ji Tianyue was stunned for a moment, then called out, "Third sister," and chased after her. South Sky Emperor. His heart sank slightly, and he felt somewhat regretful. He seemed to have hurt his daughter again. Although the Empress had always been virtuous, she couldn't help but get angry. "Your Majesty, must you provoke her like this? What did she do wrong? It wasn't her fault that Rongyue Tianlan ran away from the marriage. She was still an infant at that time. She didn't know anything. It was you who coveted the Eastern Sky Clan's power and influence. So in the absence of the person involved, you arranged this unlucky marriage for your child. It's already tragic enough for the child to end up like this, yet you're still using these things to stab her and pin all the blame on her. Is this fair to her? The South Heaven Emperor was stunned. The Empress couldn't help but cry as she spoke. I know you don't like her, but she only comes back once in 100 years. Can't you treat her better? You must provoke her to leave before you are satisfied, right? The South Heaven Emperor was also regretting it. After hearing the Empress cry, he couldn't help but feel even more irritated. I'm doing this for her own good. It's not good for a girl like her to always play with swords and sticks. I don't need her to appear in public and lead troops to war. Wasn't the reason why Xin Yu was able to cultivate martial arts because you sent her to the Purple Cloud sect? How could he not cultivate there? I sent her there in the hope that she wouldn't be so ill. She only needs to cultivate a little to strengthen her body. Needlework is more important for girls, so that she can find a good husband in the future. But that Rongyue Tianlan has already run away from the marriage, and we can't find her. How can we cancel this marriage? If we don't cancel the marriage, our Shen Yu won't be able to arrange another marriage. The Empress couldn't help but grit her teeth when she mentioned this. Chapter 2631. The South Sky Emperor rubbed the space between his eyebrows. I have already discussed this with the East Sky Emperor. According to the rules of our Fanning continent, if the parties involved are not present, as long as the engagement exceeds 3,500 years, and the marriage has not yet been consummated, the parents of both parties can cancel the engagement. At that time, the East Sky Emperor also feels very guilty about this matter. He has already promised me that after canceling the engagement between Xin Yu and that little bastard, he will make the decision to arrange a good marriage for Xin Yu. The East Sky Emperor has a distant nephew who is proficient in both civil and martial arts, and holds an important position in the East Sky clan. The East Sky Emperor wanted to betroth Xin Yu to him. We have already asked around. That child is the same age as Xin Yu, so he is indeed not bad. He was also worthy of Xin Yu. It's just that our Mystic Moon continent doesn't do needlework all day long, and instead plays with swords and spears. In the end, it's not a problem. I was angry that she didn't fight, so I reprimanded her. She is also my daughter, how can I not love her? These words made the Empress feel a lot better. She said hatefully, originally, our daughter was the most outstanding. When she was just born, all kinds of auspicious signs appeared. Originally, it was the mother of the nation's destiny. At that time, there were many princes from several countries who came to propose marriage. If it wasn't for that Rongyue Tianlan, our daughter might have become the crown princess and been married for a long time. Now she can only be the wife of a marquis. This Rongyue Tianlan has really made our daughter suffer. The South Heaven Emperor sighed and said no more. At that time, Rongyue Tianlan was a famous young genius in the Fanning continent. He had cultivated to the rank of a god at a young age. He was the most influential person in the continent, and the man that thousands of girls in the continent wanted to marry the most. It was precisely because he was so outstanding that when the East Sky Emperor came to propose on behalf of his son, he did not hesitate to agree. Who would have thought? This topic was too heavy, so the South Heaven Emperor opened his mouth to say something else. Outside, the head eunuch rushed in and reported a shocking piece of news. The 8th prince of the East Sky Emperor, Rongyue Tianlan, who had left home for more than 3,000 years, had returned. The South Heaven Emperor was so excited that his hands were shaking. That bastard was finally back. He immediately ordered the head chief, quickly invite the 3rd princess over. The Empress was even more excited. She didn't know whether she should be happy or sad. If that person came back, there might be hope for his daughter's marriage. Regardless of whether it was successful or not, there had to be an explanation. He didn't have to let his daughter wait foolishly for the 3,500 years. When that brat returns, he should be able to give us an explanation soon, right? He had to teach that bastard a good lesson. Only then would he be worthy of his daughter's many years of waiting. She wanted to tell her daughter the good news herself, and let her know that her bitter days were over. A moment later, the attendants ran back to report. Reporting to Your Majesty, Your Highness, the third princess has already left the palace. We don't know where she went. We've already sent people to look for her. Did his daughter really leave again? He had only been back for less than an hour. The Empress immediately activated the voice-transmitting talisman that she often used to contact her daughter, but for some reason, it didn't connect. There was no response from the other side. It was clear that his daughter had also turned off the voice transmission talisman. The Empress angrily glared at the South Heaven Emperor. The South Heaven Emperor coughed. She has probably returned to the Purple Cloud sect. We will contact the sect master of the Purple Cloud sect. When Xinyu returns, we will tell her this news, and have her quickly return. South Sky Emperor used a sound transmission talisman to talk to the Purple Cloud sect's sect master. The Purple Cloud sect's sect master readily agreed, and even said that he would use the Purple Cloud sect's special sound transmission talisman to contact Ji Xinyu. Chapter 2632. However, an hour later, the sect master of the Purple Cloud sect sent a message, saying that he couldn't contact his disciple either. Ji Xinyu seemed to have turned off all her communication talismans. The South Sky Emperor panicked. Where could this child go? Could she be suicidal? She couldn't be, right? Perhaps this child had suffered too much in the past few years, but her style of doing things was actually calm. Normal things couldn't stimulate her at all. It was impossible for her to commit suicide after being reprimanded by her father. But why couldn't he contact her? The South Sky Emperor suddenly realized that he knew too little about this daughter of his. He didn't know her happiness, anger, sorrow, or joy, nor could he understand her emotions. He also didn't know if this was common. He could only contact the sect master of the Purple Cloud sect. The sect master told him that Ji Xinyu was very independent. She often went out alone to train. Sometimes, when she was fighting monsters or focused on something, she would turn off all her communication talismans. This was very common for her. With this as a backup, the South Sky Emperor finally felt relieved. However, a doubt arose in his heart. In such a short time, what kind of monster could she be fighting? Or was she focused on something else? A few stars hung in the sky, and a golden crescent moon hung diagonally in the sky. Some wind blew, making one's body feel slightly cold. The green glazed roof tiles shone faintly under the moonlight. This was an abandoned courtyard of a duke's mansion. The courtyard was covered in vegetation, and it was completely desolate. A place that had been abandoned for a long time would always have one or two scary ghost stories. So very few people came here. Only wild foxes and wild rabbits often appeared here. At this time, on the roof of a palace in the depths of this mansion, a young man was sitting leisurely. A jug of wine and a stack of documents were his personal belongings. This young man was Ji Xinyu, and the stack of documents was stolen from the imperial study. There was a thick stack of documents, and many of them were lengthy, all about the evil flood dragon. Most of the people who wrote these documents had fought with the flood dragon. Of course, in order to show off, there were many beautiful words describing the dangerous process, and how they risked their lives to not disgrace the imperial family. Ji Xinyu only read the important ones. She hated being disturbed the most when she was working, so not only did she turn off all the sound transmission talismans on her, she didn't even bother to light up a night pearl when she was reading. Fortunately, her internal energy was profound and her eyesight was good. Although it was under the dim moonlight, she could still see the densely packed words on the document very clearly. She took a sip of wine and read a book. By the time the entire gourd of wine had entered her stomach, she had almost finished reading the stack of books. She also gradually summed up the characteristics of the evil flood dragon from these long and smelly documents. For example, the size of his body, the strength of his demonic powers, the techniques he was proficient in. Although these documents were flashy and impractical, they were much better and more specific than her asking around randomly. She already had a general plan to deal with the evil flood dragon in her mind. The evil Jiao dragon was indeed an extremely difficult opponent to deal with, but after looking through the information, Ji Xinyu felt that she had some confidence in defeating it and taking its head. Of course, the chances of success were slim, but it was worth a try. All these years, she had used another identity to wander around the Sanskrit continent. She had fought countless ferocious beasts and vicious birds. Her experience was not ordinary. She even had the experience of defeating stronger opponents as the weak. As long as she did her homework in advance, she would often surprise people. Chapter 2633. As long as she did her homework beforehand and knew her enemy well, even if she couldn't win every battle, she would at least have a higher chance of winning. At the very least, if she couldn't win, she could run away in time. She closed her eyes and got up after a rough calculation in her mind. Picking up the wine gourd, she jumped down from the roof. She was going to eat a good meal and save her energy for tomorrow's work. It was not late and the streets were quite lively. The restaurant was not closed, and when Ji Xinyu went in, there were still more than half of the restaurant's customers drinking and eating. The more people there were, the more noisy and the more gossip there was. Ji Xinyu was too lazy to listen to the gossip, and was about to go upstairs to find a quiet room to eat a good meal, when a few voices made her stop. I heard that the Eastern Sky Clan's 8th prince has returned. That's right, I also heard about it. He has been missing for over 3,000 years, and has finally returned. This person really is something, running away without saying a word, and causing our 3rd princess to have a bad reputation, wasting her time until now. Will he come to our Nantiang clan to propose? He and our 3rd princess are not young anymore, so they should be married by now. Humph! It's hard to say if he will marry the 3rd princess. After all, he ran away for so many years, and I heard that he went to another continent. There aren't so many rules on the other continents. Maybe he is already married. No, if he is married, he will definitely bring his wife back. But I heard that he came back alone. With this kind of gossip circulating around, it naturally became the best topic of conversation for the common people. These people were chatting there, excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Ji Xinyu stood at the stairs with the wine gourd in her hand, and listened for a while. Her lips slightly hooked, and she turned around to walk up. That person is finally back. She thought that he could stay outside for 10,000 years. Now that he is back, her life will change, and she will not be so free and unfettered in the future. There were less people upstairs and Ji Xinyu let out a sigh of relief. She was about to find a place to sit down and quietly eat a good meal. A voice suddenly sounded out in high spirits. Xinyu. This voice was so familiar that the veins on Ji Xinyu's temples jumped, and she raised her head to look in the direction of the voice. At the table by the window sat a young man with a slender figure and a picturesque appearance. It was already close to winter, yet he was still fanning a mountain and river fan in his hand, and every single move he made revealed a dissolute and showy aura. He was born with a pair of watery eyes, and when they moved, they were even more alluring than a woman's. At this moment, his bewitching eyes landed on Ji Xinyu, smiling like a sunflower in the morning sun. Brother Shen, what a coincidence! I didn't expect to meet you here. Come sit here, sit here. He politely pulled out a chair. Shen Xinyu, Shun of course Shen Xinyu Shen Xinyu, Shun Ji, Ji Shen, Ji of Shun, of the royal family. Ji Xinyu met him purely by chance. A few years ago, she went to subdue a rebellious Baifeng bird, and happened to meet Rongyue Tianhuan, Ji Xinyu, who was being chased by that bird. Ji Xinyu saved him, and probably because she was too cool, Ji Xinyu was convinced. He wholeheartedly wanted to befriend her, and often pestered her to drink wine and chat. He even wanted to become sworn brothers with her. Ji Xinyu walked outside as a man. She used a technique to slightly change her appearance and figure, so no one recognized her as a woman when she walked in the Jianghu. She changed her name to Xinyu, and made friends with people, so she made a few friends. Chapter 2634. Rongyue Tianhuan was one of them. Ji Shenyu didn't want to have anything to do with the Rongyue family, so she treated Rongyue Tianhuan indifferently. She didn't want to have a deep relationship with him. But this Rongyue Tianhuan was like a dogskin plaster. He was very warm and sincere to her. She didn't want to hit a smiling person, so after a while, Ji Shenyu started to treat him as a friend. However, this guy was a bit noisy. Ji Shenyu sometimes got a headache from his noise, so she didn't want to see him too often. Recently, she had been quite faded with this guy. In just half a month, she had already met him twice. However, the last time she met him, he was very depressed, as if he had lost his parents. Ji Shenyu asked him a few questions, but he seemed to have something he couldn't say, so he just sighed again and again. Ji Shenyu wasn't someone who liked to force others. Seeing that he wasn't willing to talk, she let it go. She didn't expect that when they met this time, he would be so happy, as if he was a poor scholar who became the top scholar. His eyes were filled with joy. The two of them drank a few cups, and Ji Shenyu casually joked, "What are you so happy about? Did you get a wife?" Rongyue Tianhuan smiled like spring flowers blooming. "My cousin the 8th prince is back." Ji Shenyu. She naturally knew who Rongyue Tianhuan's 8th cousin was. She raised her hand and took a sip of tea. "I also heard about this, but what does his return have to do with you? Do you have to smile like that? This brat couldn't be secretly in love with his 8th brother, right?" Although this world didn't prohibit homosexuality, he wasn't that old. He was the same age as her. When his 8th brother ran away, he wasn't even a year old, and was still wearing diapers. How could he have fallen in love with him at that time? Could it be admiration? Rongyue Tianhuan raised his hand and patted Ji Shenyu's shoulder, letting out a sigh of relief. "Now that he's back, I won't be forced to marry Ji Shenyu, that old aunt no one wants." Pfft! Ji Shenyu spat out a mouthful of tea, spraying it all over Rongyue Tianhuan's face. "What?" Rongyue Tianhuan raised his sleeve and calmly wiped his face, saying, "You also think it's inconceivable, right?" Ji Shenyu coughed twice. "It is indeed unbelievable. Who forced you to marry her?" Rongyue Tianhuan sighed. "Just half a month ago, our East Sky Emperor summoned me and personally issued a decree. He said that if 8th Imperial Brother didn't come back, I would propose to the Nantiang clan in half a year, and get engaged to that old grandaunt. Furthermore, I would have to choose a date to get married within 3 months. When this Marquis heard this, it was as if thunder had struck me. However, His Majesty's decree cannot be violated. My little arm can't twist the thigh, so I could only agree. But I was suffering in my heart, and I couldn't tell anyone about it. I could only go out and get drunk. When we met, it was when I was the most hurt. I let Brother Shen see a joke. Come, I'll punish myself by drinking 3 cups as an apology." Ji Shenyu crossed her arms as she watched him drink 3 cups of strong liquor, her expression somewhat unreadable. Rongyue Tianhuan downed 3 cups. His handsome face was as red as a peach blossom. His eyes were also filled with peach blossom joy. "It's good now. 8th Imperial Brother is back, he can settle his own fiancée. I, your brother, finally don't have to pick up trash. I can be free for a few more years, haha." "Trash," Ji Shenyu smiled and raised her wine cup. "If that's the case, congratulations. Since you're so happy, then drink a few more cups." Rongyue Tianhuan, who had always been delicate, was in high spirits today. He was very heroic and immediately slapped the table. "All right, we won't leave until we're drunk." Chapter 2635. Rongyue Tianhuan, the young noble, did not have a high tolerance for alcohol. After a few pots of wine, he was already drunk into a pile of mush. Lying on the table for some reason, he grabbed Ji Shenyu's hand and said, "Brother Shen, you're so good looking. If you were a woman, this Marquis would definitely marry you. Say, if that Ji Shenyu was like you, even if this Marquis had to rob you, I would still bring you home." Ji Shenyu patted his face. "Young Duke, I really think that you should wake up." Taking advantage of the situation, he withdrew his hand and waved his sleeve. Rongyue Tianhuan, who was originally lying on the table, disappeared. Rongyue Tianhuan had an unknown weakness. He was afraid of skeletons. Whenever he saw a skeleton, he would be scared shitless, and his legs would go soft. He also had another harmless problem. No matter how drunk he was, he would wake up at least once in the middle of the night. Whenever he woke up, he would feel extremely thirsty and would want to find water to drink. In the middle of the night, as expected, he woke up again. His head was heavy from the hangover, and his throat was so dry that it was smoking. He opened his eyes in a daze and looked for water in a daze. He saw a small bowl of water beside him that was shining under the moonlight. He felt as if he had found a treasure. He grabbed the bowl and drank it all in one gulp. After drinking it, his mind cleared up a little. He casually looked around and was shocked. The surrounding grass was desolate, and there were countless round grave mounds scattered around. On the big tree above the grave, there were night owls staring at him with their green eyes. His body stiffened. He subconsciously lowered his head and realized that he was lying on top of a grave, and there was a large hole beneath him. However, this was not the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing was that he was holding a white skull the size of a bowl in his hand. He vomited violently. There was no other reason other than the fact that the water he drank just now came from inside the skull. In the immortal cloud mountain, the sun rose to the horizon. The sunlight shone down, giving the surrounding withered grass a faint layer of gold. Ji Xinyue raised her head to look at the sky. She pinched her fingers in her sleeves for a moment before her eyes narrowed slightly. This flood dragon liked to roam during the day and travel at night. This was the time when it was sleeping soundly, and its movements were the slowest. Furthermore, it could not use many of its ferocious skills at this time. This was the best time to get rid of it. With a wave of her hand, more than 10 wild donkeys flew out from her storage space and landed on the grass beside the coiling dragon stream. Because the flood dragons in the coiling dragon stream were too ferocious, no animals dared to come here for a long time. Therefore, the grass grew very lush. Although it was late autumn and the grass was yellow, it was still good food for the wild donkeys. As soon as the wild donkey landed, it began to eat happily on the grass. From time to time, he would let out a few joyful cries, causing quite a lot of noise. Ji Xinyu hid in the air and watched, patiently waiting for the evil Jiao dragon to appear. The evil Jiao dragon was not only ferocious but also cunning. It only ate living creatures that had been alive for more than 2 hours. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to poison its food. If the poison was too strong, the bait would die before the flood dragon could eat it. And if the poison was not strong, it would be useless against the evil Jiao dragon. The evil Jiao dragon also did not eat the skin of its prey. Therefore, even if the poison was put on the animal's skin, it would be useless. Those who came to subdue the dragon had used all kinds of poison methods, but none of them worked. The moon on the 15th was full on the 16th. Dear friends, look at your backstage. Do you still have a monthly ticket? If you do, draw a circle for Moo Moo with your monthly ticket. Moi. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.